Call this meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. This is our special meeting for Thursday, May 13th, 2021, to conduct budget deliberations. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Tim Hale.
Here.
Stephanie Nowers. Here. George McKee. Here. Robert Yent.
Here.
Moki Tu.
Here.
Jesse Sumner.
Here.
Tam Bovey. Here. Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any changes to the agenda? Continued budget deliberations? Seeing none, the agenda is approved as presented. Pledge of Allegiance. Nancy Bartels, would you stand and lead us in the pledge and welcome?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we have reached audience participation. This is your opportunity to speak to the assembly about any topic, but we're particularly interested in budget items. If you're on the telephone and would like to speak under audience participation, please hit *3. You will hear your hand has been raised. Everybody has 3 minutes. And I start out with a sign-up list. We have Nancy Bartels, who'll lead us out.
Ms. Bartels, when you come up, could you turn the button on right in front of the mic? Yeah, and just leave it on. Thank you.
My name is Nancy Bartels. I am here to voice my opposition again to the proposed cuts to library budgets. In the past, I've spoken and written about the benefits of rural libraries to their communities. Today, I would ask why the Assembly is focusing on cutting $137,000 from 3 facilities that make these communities more desirable to live in. If these cuts are made, these 3 libraries will be left with budgets that only fund building costs. They will not fund people or programs, the very things that bring these facilities to life. Library budgets are not full of fat. The extra money that are in these budgets that is sometimes left over at the end of the year is there for a reason. In Sutton, in fiscal year 19, $42,000 was left over. That was the year after I retired. And in fiscal year 20, $13,000 was left over. That's an average of about $27,000 a year. This so-called extra money is allocated in the budget to cover unforeseen expenses. When budgeting for a facility, the unforeseen expenses come in the form of furnace repairs, repair of a brand new fire suppression system, a heavy snow year that requires more plowing or sanding, water tests, higher fuel costs. Public Works, who maintain our buildings, do not cover these expenses. Individual library budgets must cover them. Once again, I ask that you reconsider these last-minute amendments you talked about on the 11th. The cuts are punitive to these facilities and communities and take away the best borough service available in those communities. I'm a taxpayer in District 1, the district with the very highest mill rate in the borough. Well, I may have some issues with the way the borough spends some of my tax dollars. I never question the small amount that goes to libraries. Please look elsewhere for $137,000. Library staff who work hard to not overspend their budgets and taxpayers who value these services should not be penalized. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any telephonic? Okay, we've got some telephonic callers. For our first caller, go ahead, please.
Good evening. My name is Ann Hayden. It's spelled Y-A-D-O-N. I currently serve as the Trapper Creek representative on the Nazi Borough Library Board. I would like to say that what Nancy Bartels has just told you is extremely accurate. I have called tonight to ask you to reject the budget amendments cutting funds from the Trapper Creek, Susitna, and Sutton libraries. Contrary to Assembly Member Sudner's statement on Tuesday evening, these budget cuts will cause a loss of services in these communities and will include closures and canceling of programs. In Trapper Creek especially, where hours are already limited, this would deeply hurt our community. In short, the loss of these services will negatively affect the lives of community members in those three communities, and because of the close cooperation among all the borough libraries, it will affect all the communities in the borough. Please remember that if you want a super bedroom community for Anchorage or for the core area of the borough, the services families look for include good schools and great libraries. And without those services, families will look elsewhere. And one final note, if I may. The Borough Library Board, one of the borough's advisory boards, reviewed those library budgets. We did our due diligence. We asked questions of borough staff about various line items and bottom lines. And we then submitted a resolution to this assembly recommending the approval of those budgets. So once again, I ask you to reject cuts to the library's budget. Thank you.
Thank you. More telephonic callers? Okay, we have another caller up, so go ahead, please.
Good evening. My name is Marcy Hawkins. I had spoken yesterday, but simply had to call back and reiterate the extreme need for services in this library, and in all of our borough libraries. It's just not, one library or three libraries. I think Mr. Sumner needs to go to each library and see exactly what they do, because what they do in Talkeetna may not work in Sutton. What they do in Sutton may not work in Wasilla. And if anything else, if he just can't do that, he can go to the Wasilla Public Library. And let me tell you, they will answer his questions regarding anything about budgeting for libraries and what exactly libraries do. It's not, as I have mentioned, dusty old books. Though I do like the dusty old books because they have a lot of information most people have forgotten. I and several others in the community of Sutton would have been lost without their library during the lockdown. They managed to put on story time, which I've been honored to do 2 of them. They have, made sure that the people who live in this community knew that their library would try to do whatever they could during this time of isolation. And I'm sure that each other communities, like Talkeetna, Trapper Creek, Big Lake, Willow, has done the same thing. If you start nitpicking and cutting away, you will absolutely start taking away services from the Matanuska-Susitna Borough residents, which I am one of. So if you're going to sneak in last-minute budget cuts, make sure that these cuts are actually something that's worth taking away, and make sure that you are being held responsible. If you're going to take away, travel fare, fine. Have all of your travel fare taken away. What are you going to give up when you ask the residents in this borough what they are going to give up? And I will put a plug in for the animal shelter. Don't cut the animal shelter. Come on, guys. It seems like when everyone needs to cut somewhere, they go to the main services that everyone uses, animal shelters and libraries. Maybe we should start, taking away from some other areas. How about some administrative costs? Oh my, we wouldn't want to fire a secretary now, would we? Sorry, I'm grouchy. It's been a long day. So with that said, please, all of you, go to your libraries and find out what the big deal is and why we're here, saying something instead of snipping. And I would certainly apply that to the Wasilla representatives because they've got the biggest and best right now. So with that said, thank you so much, and please don't do this.
Okay, any other telephonic callers? Okay, we have another telephonic caller, so go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is John Strassenberg, and it's Strassenburgh. And I would like to object to the Mr. Tu's efforts now to zero out overtime under RSA administration. And this is something that's been, I would have to say, snuck in at the last minute. There's absolutely no justification on the amendment sheet. And yet it would affect the public, the RSA taxpayer in a very big way. And the RSAs themselves, have not been given a chance to participate in this. And I think this is an unacceptable assault on public safety and the RSA taxpayer. This would mean that our road superintendents would be limited to a maximum of 40 hours a week. Weather does not respect the 40-hour work week. Road maintenance contractors routinely work around the clock during periods of heavy snow or other weather events. It's the road superintendent who is crucial to a timely and appropriate response to hazard situations. He is the one who gets notification, and he's the one who has the authority to call out the road maintenance contractor to fix the problem. If the road superintendent is constrained to a 40-hour work week, if a tree falls across a road, if there's overflow ice on a road, if a culvert gets blocked, or if flooding or other hazard occurs, the response would be delayed until the next workday, or if it's a weekend or holiday, this could mean a 2 or 3 day delay. Also, the road superintendent monitors the performance of a maintenance contractor and ensures compliance with the terms of the contract. This is a very important function necessary to ensure that taxpayer funds are wisely and appropriately used, and that the RSA taxpayer receives the quality and level of service that they pay for. And this is not uncommon. In roads, when you do road construction on the Parks Highway, there's an inspector. When you do fix the dike in Talkeetna, there's an inspector. Corporations have auditors. I mean, this is a very, very, very important thing. And the road superintendent is a big job, especially in the Northern Valley where I live, where everything seems to be spread out, and you can't perform this job in a 40-hour week. There's a lot of travel and difficult places to get to, etc. And I also disagree with the way this amendment has been put forward. It's being put forward at the last possible moment. It would have enormous negative impact on the public, and yet the RSAs have not even been notified and provided an opportunity to be heard. So I think this is an extraordinarily bad proposal, and I hope the Assembly will reject it. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other telephonics? No more telephonic callers? Anybody else in the audience wish to speak to the Assembly? Ms. Fisher, come on, please.
Yes, my name is Patty Fisher, a resident of the borough. I want to speak to the process or lack of good process that's been has been exhibited during this budget session, in particular with the amendments that have been proposed at the last minute. While I recognize that amendments are allowed and necessary, it is a very poor process, in my opinion, to offer these amendments with almost no opportunity for the public to have input. The amendments that are listed here on this packet tonight are critical: solid waste, fire service, road service. It is wrong that we do not have advanced opportunity to speak to them, and it almost appears as if the staff has not had an opportunity to analyze these. it appears as if the assembly members that are making these amendments are either not doing adequate homework to start with, or they just want to slip something in under the carpet at the last minute. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak?
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I live in the Matsup Valley. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, decision made by the governing body is more likely in the public interest. I'm glad I came after the previous speaker. Every word she said is absolutely correct as far as I'm concerned. The behavior of the assembly and the management of the budget has been despicable. 5 days before the public hearing on the first budget, you released the budget for the public. What opportunity. You had 3 public hearings. One of them was in this room. Public had an opportunity to call in, but the other 2 locations, public had no opportunity to call in. You had to be able to go into Talkeetna or Menard Center or Wasilla. This failure is, one word, despicable. Nothing surprises me, it's more of the same. But as far as the funding, I'd like to bring out the point is you continue wanting to increase the salary of the borough mayor. You want to provide more benefits to the borough mayor. And the end result is there is a commission, salary amendments. It says it shall, not may. Shall means it must meet every 2 years. Check the website on that. There's no one on the commission now. It hasn't met in years. But that is the commission that deals with whether what the assembly salaries are, the mayor's salaries are, the planning commission salaries are. That's where the party plays a role, and there's public hearings. You have exhausted the public in saying, what's the use? And you continue doing whatever you want to do. But I remind you, it's a conflict of interest. You cannot pay yourself money. Anchorage does not do it. Other communities do not. They realize that. Even the school board realized that when I addressed it. And they tried and it says, oh my God, it's a conflict of interest. And they pulled back in this past year several times because they understood that. But you're playing this game, and it's a horrible game to reward yourselves money and benefits. You are not the board. You are assembly members. Mayor, you're the mayor. And I agreed with the mayor. Remember, this doesn't have police powers in the borough. It's managed by the borough manager. Are you all forgetting that in the discussion? This is not the way to go. And they're talking about marketing Alaska and economic development. And I was not here for most of the meeting last one because I was in Palmer, but I listened to the testimony and speaking and closing. You really don't know the history of what's been going on. You really don't know the history,
Okay.
particularly on the economic development. By the way, just one compliment. Stephanie Nowers, I listened to your comments at last meeting and just say, thank you. You had more understanding of what was going on than almost everyone, but I also like to compliment Assembly Member Bovee too.
How about the mayor?
Yes, regarding to the mayor today.
Good thing.
You had difficulties in managing the situation with the way the rest of the Assembly
That's
members
good.
were operating.
That's good. I was just kidding. Thank you. Okay, any telephonics? Any more? Anybody else in the audience wish to speak to the assembly? Otherwise, I'm going to close audience participation at this time. Okay, I will close audience participation. And Madam Clerk, please read the legislation into the record.
Ordinance 21021, an ordinance appropriating monies from the central treasury for the borough operating funds, enterprise funds, educating operating fund, and capital funds, establishing the rate of levy for all borough functions for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2021, and ending June 30th, 2022, and setting the surcharge rate for the wireline and wireless enhanced 911 systems for the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The main motion's on the floor. We have 3 primary amendments that were continued from Tuesday evening. We'll just take those in order. It's amendments 1, 7, and 10. And just to let you know, on the green packet, when we get to the green packet, on page 11 is Mr. Yount's amendment. I'm going to start with that one because he gave us oral notification. So we'll go to that one, then we'll just go through that packet. So let's go to Amendment 1, Madam Clerk.
This was the amendment for the libraries, Mr. Mayor. This was Assembly Member Sumner's, and it has been postponed is on the floor.
Mr. Sumner?
I move to table indefinitely,
Postpone indefinitely,
postpone indefinitely.
which is, any objection to postpone indefinitely basically kills this amendment. Any objection? Okay, seeing no objection, Amendment 1 has been postponed indefinitely. Amendment 7, Madam Clerk.
Amendment 7, Mr. Mayor, was in reference to the $722,000 reduction out of a common contractual, which was also Assembly Member Sumner's.
Hey, Mr. Sumner?
I think that I adequately expressed last time my reasoning, but I was going to see if the finance director had got any more data on the port that she could present.
I would like Mr. Spropoulos to tell us a little bit about this issue too. Go ahead, Ms.
Through the mayor to Assembly Member Sumner, the revenue projections are in your packet. So basically, we have the Uplands lease and Director Dolan can speak to the projections for the dockage and wharfage on this. So this is what we came up with.
For the Assembly, it's this form in your red folder.
Teresa Dolan, Port Operations Manager. When I put together these projected revenues, I was very conservative in my estimates because we truly only have 2 Uplands leases at this time. Both of those tenants do intend to use the port. One of them currently is using the port. That's Kolaska. They have a deep draft. They brought in a deep draft vessel of cement last year. Excuse me. And they have another one scheduled to come in August. The Uplands lease monies that we receive between the 2 leases that we have comes to $173,000 a year. The dockage and wharfage, you'll notice I've broken it out by year. These are estimates based on discussions I've had with these companies and what how they see their business developing. Central Alaska Energy will probably start shipping in fiscal year 25 and would probably start out around $100,000 a year, working their way up over the next several years to about $250,000 a year in dockage and wharfage. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Questions? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Mr. Spropoulos, you weren't here with us on last Tuesday evening when this amendment was brought up. The $722,000 is part of this NPI negotiated agreement. What does it do? Explain it to us.
So under the NPI negotiated agreement, remember NPI relinquished their leasehold interest and the conveyor, the building, some stuff out there. They have until August to clean up, remediate, and remove the remaining personal property. And then after that, effective as of the date of the agreement, remember NPI had about $1.3 million in credits, but they also had a tax liability. And the difference between those two numbers was $722,000. So since we've signed this agreement, what happens is all the revenue that comes into the port, the borough gets 100% of it until it gets $722,000. The next set of revenue that comes into the port is split 50-50 until both parties get $722,000. And then after that, a clock starts. And for 10 years, there's a revenue split, 80% to the borough, 20% to NPI without any cap or anything like that. That's a time period. But that time period doesn't start until NPI gets $722,000. So the borough in phase one gets all the money, but we can forego it if we'd like. And in phase two, NPI is not entitled to anything except for the port revenues. But the borough has the option, if it wishes to accelerate the agreement, to make payment from other sources. And that's what this 722 potentially would be. I think having it in the budget allows you to have that discussion at some point if you'd like to. But this 722 would then start that 10-year clock should the assembly decide to pay it. And like I said, it's our option to pay whether or not it comes from the port or from other sources.
Mr. Hale, did you have?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the mayor to the attorney. So correct me if I'm wrong, but for some reason I had the idea that when we hit $6.5 million, which is the buyout price, regardless of whether the 10-year period had expired or not, then the agreement was finished and complete. Is that correct?
That's true.
Okay,
That's true. There are two alternate provisions that are buyout provisions. If we buy out within the first 24 months of the agreement, it's $3.95 million. It's $4 million basically. And then the other buyout, if it's more than 24 months after the date of the agreement, it's 6.945 because it got reduced at the last minute. But it's basically 6.5 million. That effectively would act as a hard cap for the 10-year period, because as we got close to it, we would just make payment and call it the final sum of the buyout.
When did we start with NPI? Do you recall, you were borough attorney, what year was it and how long has it been, and some of the history of this?
So the NPI, the first NPI agreement was entered into in April of 2001 by the Borough Assembly. And that was for the Uplands lease, which is the land up the bluff. It's not down on the port or the dock. It's up on the bluff. It's where the pad and the warehouse currently exists. And it's paved and it's cleared. It's the staging area. 2 years later, in December of 2003, we entered into the dock lease, which then sets up the conveyor belt and the priority use rights that runs down the hill and across the face of the dock and to the water, actually. So the first one was in 2001. The second one was in 2003. And both of those agreements were scheduled to terminate in 2041. But they've been terminated by the agreement that the Borough Assembly approved on April 20th of this year.
Okay, Ms. Nowers.
Thank you, through the mayor to the attorney. Just to clarify, so if we were to start the clock by paying $722,500 and the 10-year lease starts and we got to the end of 10 years and no income had come through the port, how much would we owe to NPI? Zero. Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Others? Questions? So we own the conveyor belt and all of the things that are out at the port now left by NPI.
Yes, under the agreement, the other thing I should probably add, as long as we're kind of talking about this, under the agreement, NPI left and the borough took ownership of the warehouse, all paved areas, just because pavement is an improvement to real property, the loading hopper, the scale, the electrical sheds, the conveyor itself. I think that's it. The scales. And under the agreement, NPI is supposed to remove all other real and personal property, and B, remediate other certain issues. There's a couple of, barrels filled with stuff out there. There's a couple of empty tanks sitting around out there that they have to clean up, remediate, and move away. They have until August 1st to do it. And in developing the list of remediation, the borough hired a company called Travis Scott Peterson to go out and do the environmental analysis. Under the agreement, NPI has to hire Travis Scott Peterson to do an analysis and certify to us that all of the prior things that they have identified have been either cleaned up, removed, remediated, whatever the case may be. If by August 30th, we don't have either cleanup or the report, the borough then hires a contractor to do the cleanup and report, and we deduct double the amount from any potential sources due back to NPI. So, in previous conversations with the borough manager, I've explained any discussions about whether to accelerate the buyout or anything like that probably are premature right now, because if August rolls around and we have to hire a contractor, that 722 number is going to drop by double the amount of whatever the contractor is. But it's in the budget now because, of course, you approve the budget now, in case you want to have a discussion later.
Okay, Mr. Yant.
It's that last portion that Nick talked about that holds a lot of weight with me. Would I love to start this clock this evening? I think we all probably would, but from a business sense, it makes no sense, right? So we're going to get the first 722,000 to us in this agreement. We still don't even know if they're going to hold up to their end of the deal, right? And go clean this place up and do what they agreed to do. So I don't know. Like I said, we hold the cards right now. They don't, and we can put forth this money. When does the 2 years, Nick? Can you tell me when that 2 years is? If we wanted to do the lower amount of the buyout before, is
April 20th, 2023.
Yeah, we got time. I don't know. Thanks. That's all I got.
Yeah. So I'd concur. The lower total buyout may make sense, although I'm not certain about that. But certainly if these revenue projections were realized, we would be making a horrible mistake by paying the 722 out now, because we would forego 722,000 of this revenue. And if you can just imagine a year 11 here, and if you extrapolate these numbers, it would be about, at that growth, it'd be about 722,000. So we would be paying 722 now, losing 722,000 in revenue that we would otherwise get in order to get 50% of 722,000 in year 11, or to save the 50% of 722,000 in year 11,
80.
as opposed to paying it next year, say
80%.
80%?
As soon as NPI gets $722,000, it's an 80-20 split.
Okay, so we'd be saving 20% of 722,000. That's even worse.
It's just budgeted too. It's not like.
Well, I don't want anybody to even think about making a mistake this bad. I think we need to take it out of the budget.
Something remember, we get 80%. NPI gets 20%.
I know, but so if we paid this year, there would be no year 11. I'm saying if we paid it next year instead, right? Then there would be a year 11. And if you project out this growth on this chart, it would be actually around 722,000. So by eliminating the year 11, we are only saving ourselves 20% of that year 11 revenue by not paying it to NPI, by starting the clock now. 20% of that isn't worth saving at the cost of 722,000 out now and foregoing 722,000 of this revenue total. I mean, that would make no kind of sense.
Let's see, Ms. Bovee, then Mr. Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's really difficult to speculate what the port income is going to look like for the next 10 years. And by approving the $722,000, we're not deciding to spend that right now. It's giving us the option in the next 12 months. If it looks like that would be in our best interest, the money is there. If it's not, we don't spend it. So I think we have... We've spent enough time on this. I would like the option going forward to start the clock. Thank you.
Mr. Hale and Mr. Yant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess the way I see this is we have a guaranteed maximum price, $6.495 million. So I'm not so much concerned with starting the clock now and getting through the 10-year period as I am with the early buyout option. And I think that, if we could find a way to get that early buyout option and just completely get this monkey off our back, that would be great. But as far as starting the clock now, I don't see as it makes a whole lot of difference one way or the other.
Mr. Yount?
I call the question.
Okay, the question's been called. Any objection on that? If you honor that, it ceases debate.
I take that back. I am very sorry. I didn't know Stephanie had her hand up.
Okay, it's been withdrawn. Ms. Nowers, go ahead and.
Thank you. I agree with Assemblymember Hale. I don't feel the urgency to start the clock. I'd like to see the 772 come out of port operations, hopefully sell that conveyor and use it there. We're making a bet, like the worst, the best case scenario would be start the clock, 10 years goes by, and then MPI is out and boom, we get a $100 million customer. But I feel comfortable with the $6.5 million cap, that I don't feel urgency to take money from our pocket or have it available. But I would like to see, hopefully we get that out from the port operation. So I'm going to be supporting this.
Okay, I'll just comment quickly. Basically, for 20 years already, NPI has been basically part of the port, a thorn in the side of the Matsu Borough. We've lost a lawsuit to them. My theory on NPI is to try to get their leases into our name, try to remove them from any ability to interfere with any type of port activity in the future. And so they crafted this document to allow some things like that. You can do a buyout in the first 2 years. I'd recommend that because, if you don't do anything, this would go on for another 30 years. It just has not worked. That port is sooner or later, we have to turn it up. So, really, you could sell the conveyor belt and things like that and use that type of money for this activity. There's a lot of options. So I think the manager put this in the budget for a good reason. So we'd have this debate. The money's not going to automatically leave. Obviously, there's some things that would trigger that. It would have to come back to the assembly in the first place. So let's go ahead and vote on this. I'll call the question. This is objection. So for the amendment number 7, is there basically Mr. Sumner's pulling this money out of this current year budget? Is there any objection to that? Ms. Bovee objects, so go ahead and vote for the record, please. You'll be pulling the money out of the budget, $722,000.
Mr. Mayor, it passed with Assemblymember Bovee opposed.
Okay, the next amendment is what, Madam Clerk? 11?
It's amendment number 10, and it has to do with travel tickets and expense reimbursements outside the borough, and it was also Assemblymember Sumner's.
Okay. Amendment number 10, Mr. Sumner.
I move to postpone indefinitely.
Boy, this is music to my ears. So this is the same as amendment number 1. Any objection to this motion to postpone indefinitely amendment number 10? Seeing and hearing none, amendment number 10 is postponed indefinitely. So that concludes your pink packet. Now we're going to go to the green packet, and like I said, the first, which is going to be amendment number 11. So go to page 11, the last page in your green packet. That'll be Mr. Yount's, who gave us oral notice of this Tuesday night. So Mr. Yount.
Capital Projects Grants, tab M. I move to amend Capital Projects Grants by inserting a grant for the My House organization in the amount of $100,000.
Okay, you can speak to it if you like.
I would like to. So I was unaware when I was elected of what George had kindly done for the My House organization years ago. I've been lucky enough to observe what they've been doing for probably the last 7 or 8 years at least in our community. And I can tell you they've impacted a lot of lives. The statistics are just numbing what they've been able to do for our worst off children in our community. And so I know they have plans to try to build that next building. I did talk to our attorney and find out that what I wanted to do was tie some strings to this and make sure that they would have to go out and get at least a 2-to-1 match, but it sounds as though that's not necessarily legal. So we are, we are looking at the last agreement that was done with them and going to maybe build off of that. Nick can speak to that, but to me, I can't say enough good things about what they've done. I know there's other good organizations out there too, but none that I know of who are really just, what they're doing is simply just for kids who their situation in life could not be any worse than we could imagine. And so, if it passes, great. If it don't, I understand why. I mean, we are trying to lower the taxes, and I appreciate that too. So, and that's it. Thanks.
Mr. Spratless?
I just do want to clarify for the assembly. I did some research, looked at the prior grant to my house. It was an operational grant back in 2018. I know that kind of money's fungible. So people talk about, oh, you helped me out, and we were able to then, look at capital improvements and things like that. This would be an operational grant. The borough has area-wide powers for education. So we could pay for education, jobs training. We also have area-wide parks and recreation powers. And I know my house also provides safe spaces for, people to congregate and, engage in recreational activities as well. So this would be more of an operational grant, but it would help them out in the long term in their kind of funding towards building a new facility or whatnot by the borough paying for this part of the operations. But I just want to be clear for the assembly that this would not be a capital grant. This would be an operational grant.
Okay, we'll call it an operational grant from right now forward. Anybody else, which is Ms. Bovee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just have a question. I don't know if anybody here can answer it. I absolutely support the work that my house does. I think it's a wonderful organization. When Michelle was here earlier, she spoke and it sounded like she said they have 2 for-profit businesses. And I was just curious how that all works because I know a lot of organizations that could benefit from a $100,000 grant right now. Thank you.
Mr. Yant?
I definitely don't want to speak for Michelle, but we order lunch from them quite often. So what they do is they bring these kids in, and it's basically a coffee shop and a sandwich shop. And then they have a closed one. So like if you want to donate items, then they bring them in, they clean them up, and then they can resell those clothes. So it's part of their job training program. They're teaching the kids how to make coffee, how to make sandwiches, and so they can go work in the food industry. And it is open to the public. Anybody can go in there and purchase food. So,
Ms. Bovee?
So I've eaten there, I've shopped there. I'm just curious why part of their organization is for profit. And how this grant, this goes to the nonprofit part of, I guess I'm just not sure how this organization is run. Thank you.
Through the mayor to Ms. Bovee, that's a good question. So Pioneer Grappling Academy, where I coach wrestling, we have a nonprofit side and a for-profit side. I know why we structured ours that way, but I don't feel comfortable answering that for another nonprofit. So,
Okay, Mr. Sumner, then Ms. Nowers?
I'm not sure there's an important difference between a hybrid nonprofit and for-profit and a nonprofit that just pays its directors an absurd amount of money. I mean, the difference is that they also pay tax and support the community that way. But I mean, I don't think that they have a huge operating overhead burden, as some organizations do that are very top heavy in admin salaries. And so not being a nonprofit, it shouldn't necessarily mean that you're not giving back to the community. They just have a different structure. So, I mean, they clearly do good work through their nonprofit side. So I don't know that it's objectionable.
Ms. Nowers?
Yeah, I'm also supportive of the work my house does. Would this come back before us as a grant agreement? So some of these questions that we're asking get kind of ironed out. It's going to come back before us again, or we just go straight through?
No, typically the grants pass-throughs that are passed in the budget are passed as part of the budget ordinance, and the authorization to expend the money is granted through the budget ordinance. Typical grants that happen every year in the budget ordinance are MSCVB, the Wasilla Planning Grant, Youth Court. This is in tab M, capital grants pass through, so it wouldn't come back.
So as far as tying this to the building that Ms. Overstreet is talking about, this would not be tied to that at all, but we have the understanding with my house that that's what we're trying to do, and I guess I trust staff to work out the details of how we do it without stepping on anything that we're not allowed to do.
And we could certainly put intent language in there, and I could talk with the finance director. We could have them come back, and we typically don't have reportable grants because doing reportable grants is administratively onerous. We don't go and watch over what people are spending things on. But I could talk to the finance director. We could come up with some type of reporting requirement, or even invite them back, in 6 months to come give a briefing to the assembly, if that's what you want to talk about what they've accomplished or something like that. That's certainly doable.
Mr. What was Ms. Overstreet's? She was looking for help with an addition to their building?
This current one, or when George helped?
No, this current one, this current money that's in.
They're actually, so they've got that architect that she spoke about that day. It's a local graduate and then went to Harvard. He's designed a building, and it's going to be a new structure completely.
So this money would go to that benefit?
Yeah, and so kind of build off what Stephanie was saying, and Nick, this is why I wanted to put some requirements in there. And obviously if we could, I would, but it's not legal. They turned the last grant or, money that George gave them into a 5-to-1 match. That 2-to-1 would be at least modest, but I did ask her to come back and report to us next budget season on how it went, but I have no problem asking to give quarterly updates or bi-yearly, either one. I don't think that'll be an issue.
Well, as long as Assembly understands what Mrs. Propp is saying, this would go out as an operational grant, and your hands are probably somewhat tied there, just as long as everybody understands that, so. Mr. Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't mind giving my house a $100,000 blank check.
Okay. Anything else? Any objection to passing amendment number 11, an operational grant to my house? Are you objecting? Ms. Bovee is objecting, so go ahead and vote, please.
Mr. Mayor, it passed with Assemblymember Bovee opposed.
Okay, now go to page 2 of your green packet. Mr. Yan, go ahead.
After watching the game of cat and mouse Jesse played with us a few days ago, are we sure this is going to wind up number 11? So do we not want to call this number 1?
This is number 12.
Yeah, but
Yes, this will be number 12. Mr.
Number
Mayor.
12, page 2.
we don't know what's going to happen.
And this is Mr. 2. So Mr. 2.
Ordinance 21021, Solid Waste Enterprise Fund, tab J, page 431. I move to amend Solid Waste Enterprise Fund by striking the proposed new position of Utility Worker 2 in the overall amount of $87,075.15.
Did you want to speak to that?
Sure. I think solid waste in the borough is almost double the national average of cost. And I think that we need to work on that. I think we need to get it back, or at least get it somewhat around what the national average is to get rid of the garbage. So by growing the landfill, that's definitely going in the wrong direction.
Okay. Mr. Sumner?
Mr. Mayor, can we possibly ask staff what a utility worker 2 does?
I was going to have Mr. Brown and Mr. Dolan jump in here and tell us about this position and how it works. So go ahead, Mr. Dolan.
Terry Dolan, Director of Public Works. Individuals in this position do a variety of maintenance and operational work in the landfill, including moving the large vehicles and trailers around the landfill as is necessary, They also do maintenance work, monitor the traffic in the lines to make sure that we're accelerating the throughput in the landfill appropriately, monitoring our where the waste actually goes. We have permits from DEC that require us to have certain types of waste be stored in certain locations. For example, construction and demolition debris that we might receive from one of your developments goes in one place, whereas the paint material can't actually go in there if there's liquid paint left over or other types of chemicals. Anything in a white plastic bag can't go in there, and we would be violating our permit if we mix those waste. And so we have to have employees out there that understand the different locations that waste have to go and can organize it and keep us within the limits of our permit, so we're not violating and potentially fined. So those are the types of work that these employees do. I'd also like to tell you that this position is being offset by the reduction in 2 on-call temporary employees. So the total amount of increase in the budget is right in the neighborhood of $29,000 for this employee.
Okay, Mr. Sumner?
So through the mayor, you'd mentioned that they try to interdict material that's not supposed to go into like the C and D cell, but the person out there that does the compacting, is that not a contractor or sub?
The compacting is done by a contractor, but they don't interface with the public. That's not one of the tasks that they do.
Okay. Yeah, I guess
they're heavy equipment operators.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily the right kind of personality to interface with the public.
He's a nice guy. I mean,
sorry, Mr. Hill.
Every time I go down there's only one person at the C and D cell. I assume that he's the one that runs the compactor over the material.
And
or
he's not there
actually it's a
continuously.
backhoe
That contractor's
or
only there.
a bulldozer.
That contractor's only there when necessary to operate the equipment. So they don't have a function down there other than to operate the heavy equipment when it's necessary. So it really depends on the speed at which the material comes in. But normally those contractors are up on the face of the lined landfill cell. And then they only bring somebody down to the C&D pit when it's necessary to operate the equipment down there.
So you're eliminating 2 temporary spots?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
And how much does that save you?
So I can tell you that the total cost of this new employee is $29,000. So one of my rules is don't do public math,
right.
But it's a significant reduction from the number you're seeing there.
Okay. Mr. Yant?
Help me out with that again. So it's going to save 29 or it's only going to cost 29?
It's going to cost us $29,000 more than what we're paying now for 2 on-call temporary employees.
Okay.
That's the offset.
And so these on-call temporary positions, are they hard to fill or?
They're extraordinarily hard to fill right now. In the past, we hadn't had a particular problem, but right now, I believe I'm short about 9 road crew on-call temps right now today that I'm unable to fill. I'm short, I think, about 4 on-call temps at solid waste. And I know my partner in Parks and Rec is also short a lot of trail crew folks. We've been really totally unable to hire employees as on-call temps right now. So that's another benefit of this is you actually have an employee who's there rather than on-call temp positions that are unfilled.
Does that 29,000, is that take into account consideration for pension, retirement, insurance, all those things?
That's the difference right there.
Okay, that's the total difference.
Yes, and that's why you can actually get an employee into those positions because there are benefits associated with health benefits and that type of thing.
And then last question for me, but this position, utility worker 2, how many do we have on staff right now?
I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I think the finance director is going to assist me.
Okay.
Through the mayor to Assembly Member Yutt, there are currently 5 utility worker 2s in the budget. That includes the new position.
The 5 would include this.
Yes,
so
there's 4
and
right
this is
now.
one new one.
And last, one more question then. Are all those positions full or any of them vacant?
They are, the 4 positions that we have authorized this year are full right now.
Thank you.
Can you hold this one till November? I think I'm gonna need a job. I don't know if I'd be very good at it. Okay, any more comment, Mr. Spropoulos? Did you have something?
We have a
Then Mr.
position
McKee.
open in my office, Mr. Mayor.
Pardon?
We have a position in my office.
Oh,
You have a law degree.
so I got dueling jobs, okay.
That's called poaching.
Mr. McKee?
Given the new information that we have, I would ask Assembly Person 2, do you still want to do this, or is 29,000 okay with you?
I still would like to move forward.
More debate? Anybody want to call the question?
I'll call a question.
Okay. Okay, the question's been called by Mr. Tu himself. Any objection to the call of the question? Seeing none. Any objection to pass an amendment? Is it 12, Madam Clerk? Amendment number 12. There is objection, so go ahead and vote, please.
Mr. Mayor, it has failed with Assembly Member 2, McKee, and Yunt in support.
Okay. Let's go to the next
What?
page.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, hold on. Can we revote, Mr. Mayor? I'm being told somebody voted incorrectly. Can we revote?
Who voted incorrectly or claims they did?
The new kid at the end of the vote.
I think this is a little, it's your call, Madam Clerk.
Mr.
Well, then
Mayor,
I move
don't
for
run the meetings. I can't
reconsideration.
make these calls.
So what is the reason you voted which way and then you want to change now?
I voted yes. It displayed no. Oh, I mean, at least I thought I hit yes.
Okay. You want to vote no?
I wanted to vote yes.
Well, I think we'll just keep the vote the way it was.
I move for reconsideration.
Okay, we'll reconsider it. When do we reconsider it, Madam Clerk?
Bear with me, Mr. Mayor. I gotta get this vote down.
Immediate reconsideration. You can, under Robert's Rules of Order, Mr. Mayor, you can move for reconsideration at any time.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, and then we have Assembly Member Sumner, who was on the side that prevailed, can vote or move for reconsideration.
Okay, so we got a motion to reconsider. Any objection to the reconsideration going forward? Ms. Nowers objects. So go ahead and vote on whether or not to reconsider.
Mr. Mayor, that passed with Assembly Members Nowers and Bovee opposed.
Okay, so it's your reconsideration, Mr. Sumner, so
So now we are voting on Amendment number 12 again.
amendment number 12 again. Any objection to amendment number 12 passing? There is objection, so go ahead and vote again.
Mr. Mayor, it passes with Assembly Member Hale, Nowers, and Bovee opposed.
Well, page 3, Amendment 13. Mr. McKee.
I move to adopt ordinance 21021. I move to amend the Fire Service Area Central Matsu FSA by striking the new proposed Fire Service Captains 3 and Firefighter Driver Operator Position 6 in the amount of $1 million to 11. Okay, and I would like to speak to it.
It's your amendment. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I made sure that all the assembly people have this colorful chart. Okay, and I would draw your attention to it. It is over a 3-year period. The number of actual fires, okay, fought in this area was de minimis. Okay, the increase was negligible on it. In fact, if you look at this whole thing, the increases in activities that are very, very big, and I brought this to the attention of the borough manager, so that in fact, as I understand it, the purpose of a fire department is to fight fires, okay? And if the number of fires don't increase, you don't need more people, okay? Now, in fact, the statistical data that was given here on this was on calls only, not on activities. I might not have put this forward had I had data that, in fact, dealt with specific activities. Example, house fires, commercial fires, water rescue, et cetera, okay? But we didn't get anything like that. If you look at this chart, the actual amount of fires fought by firefighters, the increase over a 3-year period was negligible, okay? Now, as I understand it, in speaking with the borough manager, the overall plan on this, as it was originally envisioned, was that, in fact, they would establish actually full-time firefighters, round-the-clock firefighters, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, anywhere here, and in a box, okay, in a central area, okay? Now, the last time that I talked to Mr. Barker when he was up here, I asked if they were going to get rid of the on-call people, and he said no. But in fact, the borough manager says no. If we were to accept this, a whole lot of these on-call firefighters would go away. Okay, now that might change my mind on this. If in fact someone would say, nope, what we're really going to do is we're going to bring this down to something that's viable. Now, I would direct your attention to another thing. We are not a municipal firefighting group. We are a backwater county borough, okay, that originally started out with the firefighters as volunteers, okay? There was no intent ever to turn this into something that rivaled the fire department of New York City. And that's what this thing is kind of looking like. So at this point, I say no. And I might change my mind if I were to get specific data downstream. But given right now, with the minimum amount of statistical data we have, there is absolutely no justification for putting in $1 million worth of new jobs.
Okay. Mr. Sumner?
Yeah. Through the mayor, I guess I have a question. So if we made this $1 million cut, would we just be rolling $1 million extra in the FSA fund? Because I'll tell you what'll happen, or just get another new building or something down the road there.
Let's have Mr. Barkley answer this
Good
question.
evening, Assembly members, mayor and staff. That is correct. This is fire service area funds. If it's not used for hiring these people, it would go back to the fund balance. And by the way, Mayor, fire is always hiring if you're looking for a job.
Well, tell us a little bit about these positions.
So the we're talking about firefighters, and I think that's a misconception about firefighters. Firefighters are responsible for all rescue calls, all the natural disasters, hazmat, the flooding, earthquakes, everything we respond to is the firefighters. It's classified as firefighters, but they all have these duties. The fires in Central Matsu Fire Department aren't increasing a whole lot, but we're also building a lot more, so they will increase. We have to prepare. The other part is rescue is their biggest thing they respond to. Any fire department in the United States responds to mostly rescue calls. That's the statistics. We have gone up since 2016, I think it was 16 or 18, 30% in call volume if you add rescue into it. Unfortunately, there's three of us in this room, myself, my Deputy Director Davis, and Fire Chief Steele, that started as volunteers. We got nothing. There was no paycheck when we started. Those times are gone. There's very few fire departments that are truly volunteer. The only one I'm aware of is Chugiak. And that's actually where I started and Director Davis started, is Chugiak. Then they come up with a paid on call system. When I started down here, I didn't even know we got paid. I got a $30 check for a month's work. And that's the paid on call system. So as time has gone on, we can't find firefighters. Before, if you walked in, had a pulse and could talk and you were sober, you got hired. That's how it was. Those times have changed. Now you have to be certified. You have to go through extensive training. And that's just for the on-calls. The one thing I want to clarify, but whether you're an on-call or a full-time firefighter, you're professional firefighters. That's a misconception too. They go through the exact training, the exact certification. So the problem is we can't keep them. After an academy of 20 to 25 people, after the academy in 3 years, we're down to maybe 7% left. It's a lot of work, and it's a time away from their family. When I started, our calls were about 400, maybe 500 a year. Now we're hitting that much in 3 to 4 months. The on-call system can't sustain that. They just cannot continue being away from their families. They have full-time jobs. We actually have firefighters on call, on a fire call, that we have to shuttle back to the station so they can go home to go to work. Because that's the life it is. They have full-time jobs. They're not going to make a living off of the on-call system. So in the forward thinking, we need to start having full-time firefighters. We can't sustain the amount of calls that were going on. And that's why we want the full-time firefighters. Well, the reason we want 9 firefighters is because it's 9 per truck. That's an A, B, and C shift to be covered 24/7. So it's 3 on a truck at a time. That's a driver, your captain, and a firefighter. By national standard, that's the absolute minimum. It's supposed to be 4 per truck. We're running 3. Right now, we only have 1 station that's guaranteed 24/7 to have full-time firefighters, and that's Station 6-1 in the Matsu Borough. Station 6-2 down KGB is where we also have full-time firefighters, but if anyone takes sick leave or is on leave, then we have to reduce down to 1 truck full-time. We call it a pickup game. If there's a fire right now, I know I'm gonna have 6 firefighters there that are full-time on duty right now. Every other firefighter coming, I don't know. It's a pickup game. Who can respond? If it's after midnight, we lose the response of people there because they can't go after midnight because they have to get up at 6 in the morning and go to work. So that's why we're doing this. Central has planned this. This is, I'll say, a 10-year. Chief Steele's in the audience. He was the fire chief for many years, and he's been with the department for over 30 years. He's now on the board of directors. And this is their vision. This isn't new. This is the vision. They knew this was going to happen. As the valley grows, the call volume will too. So that's why they're asking for these positions. As of last night, Caswell Board of Supervisors asked us, they want to look into the cost of a full-time, they want to hire another full-time person because they're seeing the problem we're having trying to get recruits for the on-call system. Eventually, if departments can afford it, they will get more full-time firefighters because someone calling 911 expects a quick response. The response times for full-time firefighters is cut in less than half. a volunteer or a paid-on-call firefighter gets the call, they have to wake up, they have to get dressed, get out of the house, scrape the windshield if it's wintertime, go to the station, get in their turnout gear, and then get on the truck and go to the call. Versus full-time, they're getting out of the bed, jump in their gear, they get in the truck and they're out the door. We have volunteer, fully paid-on-call fire departments in the neighboring districts that the full-time firefighters can get there and fight the fire before the on-calls can get there. That's just the way it is because of the time. So that's why we're looking for full-time.
I'm going to turn this over to some of the seminars, but Central, it used to be Central, the geographic limits had about 55,000 residents within the Central. Is that still true or is it higher than that now?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I don't have the numbers for Central's area, population-wise. I don't know their population.
That's what I was getting to.
60% of the population.
So it's probably up closer to 70,000 now within that. So, okay, let's go to Mr. Yount, Mr. Sumner, Mr. Hale, Ms. Nowers.
Thank you. Just a couple quick questions. So, and we may not have this number, but by hiring these 9, and like George had said earlier, and I want to build off what Mr. McKee was saying, what do we think, and maybe Cheyenne can help with us, that we would save by getting rid of some of these on-call people, right? Some of the on-call people. So there is a reduction here. We're going to save on one side if we hire 9 full-timers.
Through the mayor, Assemblymember Yount, that's a very slippery slope.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is I'm recruiting every day for on-calls. We will not have enough full-time firefighters to sustain all of Central's area. We just won't. We're not there yet. Every 2 to 3 years, we're trying to get more full-time to help, but the on-calls are the true heroes. They're the heartbeat of our organization. If we lose the on-calls, we will not be able to respond. And we're talking about one fire. Sometimes we have 2 fires at the same time. Just happened to us last week. So we can't rely on that. So the on-calls is very important to us.
I understand that, and maybe I should have phrased it better, but I guess what I'm saying is if we hired 9 full-timers, 9 more full-timers, those man hours and being there would alleviate us having to use some on-call. So there would be some
Absolutely.
savings in that sense. Would it
That's
be
correct.
$100,000, $200,000? That's, and we don't need to
even know.
answer that right now. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Maybe it's not even possible to calculate, right?
So maybe this will help. I can't give you the numbers, but here's what happens. If it's a structure fire, then they get up and get out of bed and go. If it's a nuisance call, a CO call, the neighbor smells plastic burning at the other neighbor's house, they don't get out of bed. They're not coming. So having full-time, they have to go to those calls, and that's how we do it.
Yeah.
We don't get a response for those type of calls because it's not worth them to get out of bed. I know that doesn't answer your question, but
No, it helps. And then, let's see here. How many full-time firemen or women, firefighters do we have borough-wide total right now?
full-time,
Yeah, full-time. Not counting,
Borough-wide?
I'm not counting administration or anything. I'm talking, guys or gals that go out and fight fires.
okay, I'm trying to think, I think it's 18 right now.
18.
That are just firefighters. That's their actual job. Dr. Davis, is that correct?
So,
15 is currently, and probably 3 at Lakes.
So-
So
18, so I'm
18.
I'm seeing these increments in 9 then so we're asking for 9, we have 18, that's 2 other increments in 9 and you had explained earlier that it takes 9 to do a full truck on a full shift it's 3 at a time. If, would 3 or 6 help? I mean, obviously 9 is better, but if it only became 3 or 6, would that still help in a way?
The only thing that would do is help me with backfill when people are on leave. It wouldn't get me another truck manned.
I see.
And this additional truck would be at Station 5-1. So geographically, in the middle of the city of Wasilla, we have 1 fire truck manned. Down about mile 7.5 KGB at Station 6-2, we'll have 1 manned, and at Station 5-1 across from the hospital. So geographically, we're covering a larger area. Also, if Westlakes or Palmer or Greater Palmer get a call, those guys respond too. So it's a quick response for those areas, not just Central.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Sumner, then Mr. Hale, Ms. Nowers.
I actually was going to ask about the employee count too, so.
Mr. Hale, then Ms. Nowers, and Mr. McKee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say, this is fire service area money. It was approved by the fire service area board. They have the money. This is how they want to use it. I say let them.
Ms. Nowers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I was laughing because I can't read lips, but I think Bert Cottle out there was saying that you might not needed to be sober when we had the on-call system years and years ago, that may not have been a requirement. Maybe I'm misinterpreting.
No comment.
Second of all, we're not a backwater anymore. I guess I take maybe, I wonder what your definition of backwater is. If you look around what's going on Fairview Loop, Ski Talk Ski area, all the subdivisions going in, Maple Springs, we got two huge, senior centers now. We got Mr. Young could speak to 2 hotels going up. We're growing, and that call volume's going up. And, the on-call, it's a not ollie income free, but you make a call and maybe you get nobody, maybe you get 5 guys, you don't know. And if you're the one needing the help, you want them to come. So I do agree with for Mr. Hale as well that this has been vetted by the fire service area, and if you want to come back with a little more notice and have a discussion about it, but at this point with fire service area looking at it and knowing the need out there, I'll be in support of it this time.
Let's see, I've got Mr. McKee and then Ms. Bovee. Then I have a question about mill rates
Okay. I'm going to go back to what Jesse said in the beginning. Remember, you're not just adding salary, an annual salary. You're adding an ongoing retirement obligation. It does not stop. It continues on. In fact, we kind of wonder about some of those folks going back to 1979 that were in this same thing. The borough has a potential liability for some of those in the past. So it does not end with just hiring today, what you're going to do today. Secondly, that would take care of Jesse's question. The other thing that troubles me about this, and by the way, I've talked to the deputy borough manager about this. Look, we don't have a real system for dispatch. Frequently, a call goes out, and when Central, in fact, sends trucks, so does some other fire service area. You have more than one fire service area responding to a single fire. Okay? And that's not my guess. You can ask Mr. Hayes about that. So that, in fact, until we clean up how we send people out and how we utilize them, it seems to me frivolous to just simply add more people. Okay, it doesn't make a lick of sense to me to do it. I wouldn't do it if it were my own money. I ask you, would you do it if it were your own money paying for this?
Let's see.
Through the mayor to Assemblymember McKee, we have one of the best top-notch dispatch centers right now. And you're absolutely right. When there's a call in Central, another fire department's coming. That's because that's auto aid. We have it set up. Not one fire department gets dispatched by themselves on a structure fire because we don't have enough people. There's not one department in the Matsu Borough can handle a structure fire by themselves. There's not enough people. So it's called auto aid. And with the ISO rating, that's how we did it to get a better rating for the ISO. So anytime you have a fire in any fire department, there's always a second fire department dispatched. And that's helps tremendously, and that's how it saved lives.
Okay. So you dispatch two. What happens if you get a fire and the one that you just dispatch both of them to the one?
We have a system in place. It's automatic move up. So anytime those two departments get dispatched, the two outside departments move up. They stage in the central location between two areas. That's automatic, and that's controlled through our dispatch center.
Okay, I'm going to end this with one thing. I had a little problem in my home. My wife put in a 911. 6 fire trucks, 3 command vehicles, and 22 firefighters showed up. That's a little bit of overkill, folks.
That's, well, Ms. Bovee,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'd have been happy.
I think too much response is always preferred. So as a former fire board chair, as a parent of 3 responders, I think George McKee made the argument for why I can't support these cuts. A strong central fire department benefits my rural communities. I mean, we're all in this together. I absolutely appreciate the fact that the central fire department budgeted for this. Yeah, no cuts.
Let's see, Mr. Yount, then Ms. Nowers. Ms. Nowers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, in addition to all the other good points I've made, I'm just mystified. You have obviously put a lot of time into thinking about this. So why is this an amendment put forth a day before we're considering with no other budget hearings? I just can't, I have questions about what you're saying. I think some of what you're saying is incorrect. And I cannot support this, something at the last minute, just because you say that you think it's wrong and you had, one response at your house. That's not going to sway me to do this. So if you want to bring it back and give some time to think about it and allow the fire service boards to input on it, the public to input on it, but I'm mystified why this is coming at the last minute and asking us to, with statistics that, we're getting right here 5 minutes before and we're supposed to vote for this. I can't support that process.
It was brought forward because the 9 jobs were just brought forward recently. If I'd have known about it in February, I would have brought it out in February.
Okay, that's fine.
We do have a board member here
Right.
also.
What year was the Sockeye fire? 2015.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Miller's.
You're thinking of Miller's way back.
Yeah, 15.
And then the McKinley fire was when?
Last 2 years ago.
2018. And so every borough fire department calls out, goes out, they're out.
Every single one
every
was
time.
represented there.
Do you think there'll be more forest fires in the next few years? I mean, this is just speculation, but what would your guess be?
Well, I mean, I can't even tell you how many we've already responded to this year alone.
Right.
It's dry. It's going to get drier. That's the prediction. So,
okay. Anybody else? Mr. Yount?
Last question, and this might be another tough one to answer. This kind of building off what George was saying earlier, where, he'd said he might reconsider if we could find some savings. And so, it's going to be really hard to pinpoint how much we're going to save on not having as many on call and not having to dispatch them out, not even counting the delay time, but there would be some savings there. But my other question is if I go build an apartment building, right, and I put in sprinklers, my insurance is lower. And so the question for Ms. Cheyenne is, if we have more full-time employees, firefighters on staff, will it lower our insurance premiums through the Mat-Su Borough?
Through the mayor to Assembly Member Yett, that's actually a better question for Mr. Barkley.
Okay.
They deal with the ISO ratings.
Okay.
so the ISO rating right now is a 4. In order to get it to a 3, you'll need 2 things: better water supply and full-time firefighters. That's the only way we're going to obtain a 3.
Okay. So this would be a partial step towards that.
Absolutely.
Not a completed, but a partial.
Right. And this isn't something new. This is over 10 to even a 15-year plan that the Board of Supervisors, and most of them are still on the board, have been working toward putting money aside. And it's the fire service area that's doing this for the taxpayers.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? Any more debate?
I call the question.
Mr. McKee calls the question on amendment number 13. So any objection to pass an amendment number 13? Any objection to calling the question? See it none? Any objection to passing amendment number 13? There is objection. So Madam Clerk?
Go ahead and vote. Mr. Mayor, it failed with Assembly Member 2 and McKee in support.
Okay, so Amendment 13 has failed. We'll go on to the next page, page 4, Amendment 14. Mr. 2, this is yours.
I move ordinance 21-021, road service area administration, tag G, page 300. I move to amend road service area administration overtime wage and benefits by the following: overtime wage by striking $150,000 and inserting 0, and reducing benefits, the amount of benefits, 412 by 66,148. So what I would say is that our road service superintendents, one of them made about $80,000 and they got about $60,000 extra for overtime. Another one of them made about $80,000 and got $50,000 in overtime. I think that this is, the borough needs to look at this. This needs to get managed. This needs to get fixed. I think this is something that nobody has been aware of, and it definitely needs to be cleaned up. But Mayor, if I could, can I make an amendment to this right now?
Madam Clerk says yes.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is change that over to, by striking the price to 150, I'd like to make that to 140. And then where it says inserting 0, I'd like to make that 10,000.
Mr. Mayor? If Ms. Heindel could figure out the benefits and we can make that change to be accurate also?
So you're striking 150,000, going to 140,000.
Yep.
And then Ms. Heindel will calculate that other one number. And then when that's done, we'll do a staff report.
Mayor, I'd also like to insert 10,000, right? Yeah, okay.
They're working on it. Who's?
Right now, he's doing 150, because the 150 is what's in the budget.
Mr. Yant?
I think what Mr. Two is trying to do, he wants to strike the 150 and make it 0, but now what I think he's trying to do is strike the 150 and make it 10.
Right, that's what,
Right.
so that's what the manager.
Thank you,
It would
Robert.
leave
You're welcome.
$10,000 in the, yep. But we need to figure out the difference in the salaries and
Right there.
benefits.
So striking 10,000, Madam Clerk, is the correct number? Not 150.
The amendment to me would leave $10,000 in overtime, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Striking 140.
It would be striking 150,
Inserting.
inserting 140,
Okay.
striking 0, and inserting 10,000.
Okay,
Thank you.
we'll let them finish calculating then. Kind of nice, if it's so quiet in here. Okay, Madam Clerk says you could go ahead and debate, so it'd be Mr. Sumner, Mr. Yant, and Mr. Hale.
wait, now she's.
I have
Okay.
the answer
It was
through the
quiet.
mayor to the assembly. So the benefit, we would strike 66148 and insert 61738. Oh, yeah.
It only went down by, it went up?
It went down because there'll be about approximately $4,400 left for benefits for that overtime.
Can you state that number again for me?
You're going to strike the reduction of benefits, that's 66148, and insert 61,738.
Thank you. I wrote 67. That's why I got confused. Thank you.
Okay, so the amendment, Madam Clerk, could you read it, both bullets, so everybody knows?
I'm gonna say it more clearly, Mr. Mayor. So it would leave $10,000 in overtime. And it would reduce the amount of benefits that would be coming out, Mr. Mayor. The benefits would now be reducing the benefits by 61,138.
Okay, so that's the amendment. Any objection to passing that amendment? Mr. Yount, do you want to debate it or talk about it?
If we're reducing, 90-something% of that 150, how are we not reducing 90-something% of the benefits?
Through
Good
the mayor
question.
to Assembly Member Yet, we are the reduction to benefits is $66,000 on the 104, on the original 150. So we're still leaving 140,000 reduction for wages. So the total reduction for benefits, the remaining
I think we'd only
benefits
be
is
leaving,
$4,400.
I think we'd only be leaving 10,000.
We're leaving 10,000 for wages, and the benefits after the reduction from 66 to $61,000 is $4,400 that would be left in benefits for that $10,000.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Took me a minute to.
Okay. Mr. Sumner, you were up next.
Yeah, so I do have some questions. So it says road service areas administration. I guess my first question would be, is this specific to the road supervisors or?
Get Mr. Dolan up here.
Terry Dolan, Director of Public Works. This line is used to fund right in the neighborhood of 14 different positions. It includes the road maintenance superintendents, also our full-time road crew, our surveyors, a handful of other folks that are involved in providing road service type tasks across the borough.
So they're all classified as administration because the contractors do most of the actual maintenance?
So it's road service area administration. It's not borough administration. So below borough administration, in the Public Works Department, you have Public Works Administration as a division. And then below that, in the Operations and Maintenance Division, there's a road service area line that also has road service administration as a sub-element of it. So it's pretty far down the food chain for administration. It's just the title of a line that we pay for, essentially sort of borough-wide road services. So we don't have borough-wide road service authority, but there are certain tasks that are spread out across all of our road service areas. For example, part of my salary comes out of borough road service administration. And so that's essentially split up by a formula across all of the road service areas.
Ms. Nowers?
No, we got Mr. Yount, Mr. Hill.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Yount, then Mr. Hale.
So part of my question was answered. There's 14 different individuals that this overtime.
I'm going to look at the manager because he has the list in his hand. It is 14. I think two of the people on there, two of the positions are salaried on that list.
Okay.
Okay, so there's 14 that are not salaried and two that are salaried. So of the 16 on that list that are supported by those funds, only 14 are eligible for overtime.
Okay. And so my next question then, and obviously I realize it's probably, it for sure, I mean, based on these numbers, most of this I believe is going to the road superintendents. I'm sure some goes to the road crew and the surveyors, but I know we have some ongoing discussions right now with possibly setting up a different type of system for when everybody calls in. So if this were to go through tonight before that system is created, who would it be right now that answers the phones at night time and on the weekends and holidays and whatnot? And that might be a better question. It could be answered.
So there won't be a
Mr.
change to who responds to requests from the public or requests from assembly members that occur after hours. It'll still be the road maintenance superintendents. That's who I call when I have calls from residents or calls from neighbors or calls from you. I call the superintendents because they're the experts that are there 24/7, 365 to assess exactly what the situation is and determine what response is necessary and how urgent it is, whether we need to get on it right now immediately, whether or not they need to bring in contract manpower and equipment, or whether we can do it with our on-call road crew.
I understand that. Maybe I could build on what I was saying then. So if it had gone from 150 to 0, there would be 0 overtime ability. And we know anyone who's not getting paid is not going to answer their phone. Now we have the ability, possibly, may have, we're still in an amendment, but we may have the ability to go up to 10,000. If we hit 10,000 and we had no more available overtime to us, who would answer the phone? Because nobody's answering for free.
I don't think we have a plan. I mean, we have 2 employees that would still be being paid in road service admin, and that would be myself and Jim Jensen. So we would be the available manpower to respond to downed trees and complaints and that type of thing over the weekend.
Okay, there's a lot of where Moki's going with this that I really, really like. But I do have some concerns. I know when it starts snowing out, these poor superintendents probably take a bunch of calls from people just calling to tell them it's snowing. Like we can't all just look out the window and tell, And I think by Moki lowering it from 150 or increasing it from 0 and going up to 10, I think he too sees that it's important that at least be some available. Do we have to vote on this amendment that he put forth on the 10, or can I?
We need to do the amendment.
Or
We need to do the amended amendment. to
Amended
start with.
amendment, okay.
So
And then,
the furthest you can go is a secondary amendment, and that's where we're at right now.
okay, so we have to vote on that
Yes.
prior to, okay, I'm done.
So I'm not sure if that was a question, but I think the answer, if it was a question, is that when the phone rings, you don't know if it's someone calling to tell you that it's snowing or if it's MATCOM calling to tell you that there's a dangerous situation out there. You have to actually assess each phone call to determine whether or not there is a problem that needs an immediate response. And that takes somebody who knows what assets we have available and how they ought to be applied and when they should be applied. So I can't just hire an on-call temp employee, college student or something to answer the phone at night. It wouldn't really be effective, and we wouldn't be able to provide the level of service that our residents have come to expect.
Ms. Brown?
Yeah, so through the mayor to Mr. Young, and really to the assembly as a whole, with $10,000 in overtime for these positions, these 14 jobs that Mr. Dolan's alluding to, if I had $10,000 there as the manager for overtime wages, I would preserve it for a disaster. So basically, to answer your question, if those phone calls came in, they wouldn't be taken at night. They would be taken the next morning. And like we had an issue, like I just had an issue recently where an assembly member contacted me about potholes in the road that were dangerous because it was along an unlit road. So we dispatched Terry. I called Terry. He activated his crew, sent out the road crew on a Saturday. We wouldn't do that. It would wait till Monday. And to fix the issue and put up signage to tell folks, hey, slow down. There's a dip in the road because we couldn't pave it yet. And it was a project from last year that hadn't been paved. So examples like that. The reality is what I would read out of this, if the assembly approves this at 10,000 or even at 0, is the assembly's telling me, do not apply overtime in this area. And that's what I would execute. Does that make sense? And I'm not trying to be an obstructionist about it. I just look at it and I go, that's what you're communicating to me with your intent as to how you want to see that funding executed.
Let's see. So we got Mr. Hale and Ms. Nowers and Mr. Sumner.
Mr. Mayor, my question is on the primary amendment, not the secondary, so I'll reserve it until then.
Well, maybe we should dispense with the secondary amendment. Ms. Nowers, you're on the. Mr. Sumner, you on the amendment?
Although I didn't realize I could get potholes fixed in my district on a Saturday, so we'll be calling.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, The issue was a culvert replacement that went across the roads. It wasn't a pothole, it was a dip issue that had eroded away during breakup. So we considered it a safety issue. So there was no signage. So we went out, and the contractor can address the grading issue, but the signage would have been on our road crews. And instead of just leaving it, we thought it would be responsible to go out on a Saturday and fix the issue. But I'll use a more serious one. Unless we have a responsible community member, if we have a tree across a down road, we would probably send out a crew to do that, unless we knew of someone that might drive by with a chainsaw and take care of it themselves.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can you read the amendment to amendment number 14? So,
Mr. Mayor, the amendment is to leave $10,000 into overtime, and then it also lowers the amount of benefits that would be taken out, Mr. Mayor.
is there any objection to that amendment? There's objection. So we're voting on the amendment.
Voting on the secondary amendment.
Secondary amendment. You're leaving 10,000 in the first bullet and 61,738 in the second bullet. Is my understanding. I guarantee you're going to get a lot of complaints, but.
Mr. Mayor, it failed with Assemblymember Sumner, Assemblymember 2, and Assemblymember McKee in support.
Okay, so any more debate on original amendment number 14? Okay, we got them lined up. I see. Ms. Nowers.
I have a question for Mr. Tu, and then I have some comments. So, Mr. Tu, with this reducing it to 0, who do you expect to respond? Like, what's you think we're paying too much to the road service area superintendents? Like, who is gonna, and I think this has come up, but what was your vision for how we would deal with those situations that we needed somebody to respond to?
Well, I think the manager, we've discussed that he's going to start with a program that when it calls in, it actually calls the contractor to go out there. And like a down tree, the contractor would respond to that anyways. Your contractors are paid to monitor the roads 24/7. So they're the ones that are out there doing stuff. And yeah, so I just looked right here. These 3 superintendents got paid $130,000 in overtime. So when we're talking about giving overtime to, I think, 13 people, well, I guess the other 13 gets to share the 20,000 or the other 10. So that's my vision.
Okay. This is another one where I feel like this really subverts the public process and makes these boards who are there to provide advisory input feel like, why are we bothering? I talked to RSA 16 today and also to Steve Edwards, who's, head of the RSA boards. They had not heard anything about this and were very concerned about the idea that the supers wouldn't be able to respond or have overtime. One thing they said is they have meetings sometimes in the evening, and why should they have a meeting if they can't have a borough representative there and the guy should be paid? They also feel like the supers provide a service in overseeing the contractors, a really important function there. That they said the road service areas, they advise, contractors are there to do the work, and the supers are there to ensure that the work is done well. So, this is one where you're bringing it to the table at the last minute. There might be some merit to figuring this out, but again, how can we support something that's brought at the last minute with ignoring all the boards and input that we have set up to get some of that feedback? And that was the initial feedback I just got, today, because I got this yesterday. So I can't support what I'm hearing from them is these guys do an important job. And I can't just on the spur say 10,000 is going to do it, especially in listening to, how the borough is going to take that. So I won't be supporting this.
Okay, let's see. Mr. Sumner. Okay, Mr. Sumner, Mr. Tu, then Mr. Young.
Yeah, so I actually had a question about So does the benefit load decrease as a percentage of overtime, or is it the same percentage as straight time, as far as the calculated benefit load?
Through the mayor to Assemblymember Sumner, yes, the benefit load would decrease because health insurance would not be a part of that calculation. And that would be the only decrease would be health insurance. Everything else is a percentage of wages. So SBS, PERS.
But not the reserve for workers' comp though, right?
Workers' comp is a percentage applied to their
A
total
straight
wages.
percentage of overtime is
Yes,
the
it
same
is.
percentage as?
Yes, it is because we're self-insured.
Okay. That's,
Okay, Mr. Tu, then Mr. Yount, then Ms. Bovee.
What I would say is there's three people that shared $130,000. And I would say that their salary is $80,000. They get $60,000 in overtime. There's a problem there. There is a problem. Here it is. I think we need to pass this.
Mr. Yount.
I got a couple of quick questions and then I'm going to bring forth a secondary amendment. So quick question, how much does a superintendent get call? How much do they get for a call? A question through the mayor to Mr. Nolan. So if somebody calls in, what are they paid, sir? How long? 5-minute phone call. How long does that take? Or what goes on their overtime?
So it's a complicated answer. The borough has an agreement outside of the collective bargaining agreement with these employees that specifically recognizes the need for them to do work from their homes. We have 1,500 miles of roadway and 16 separate road service area contracts that they oversee, and they do that 24/7, 365. So this agreement authorizes them during every pay period overtime dollars to do that from their homes. During the summertime, the agreement authorizes them 1 hour per pay period, and during the wintertime, it authorizes them 2.5 hours per pay period, I believe. Is that correct? I believe so, anyway. So we may have to go get you that agreement so you can read it.
That's okay.
It further stipulates that if there is additional work beyond those times, those employees collect overtime for that additional work. And so that process involves them recording each phone call, the content of it, and the time that was involved in that phone call. And it actually is recorded in our electronic timekeeping system. They have to keep detailed records and put the amount of time in the system. So once they, in the wintertime, for example, have accumulated 2.5 hours of overtime, and then they have additional phone calls that come in, the first phone call that they receive after that 2.5 hours, they receive 1 additional hour of overtime. Within that next 1 hour period, if they receive 1,000 phone calls, they don't receive any more overtime pay. After that 1 hour is expired and they receive additional calls, they'll receive an additional hour. But once that hour begins, all calls within that hour, there's no additional pay. So that's the way the system works. It is a unique agreement with these 3 employees that recognizes the fact that we need somebody monitoring the conditions of our roadways 24/7.
Okay.
Okay.
You have some more? Yeah, you go ahead if you could.
I was going to offer up a secondary amendment, if that's all right.
Okay,
Or would this be, Ms. Bovee?
Thank you. So I expect some of that overtime was in my district. We've had some really big storms. We've had some contract failures. And we've had some really serious safety issues that typically don't happen between 8 and 5. So to me, this overtime pay is how we ensure that we are giving our taxpayers a good value for their dollar. They're paying for road service, and this is how we ensure that they get that. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hale, then we'll get back to Mr. Yount for his secondary amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 2 quick questions and then probably a comment afterwards. Is this RSA money or is this area-wide money first?
So this is road service area money, but it comes from all road service areas into this administrative account.
And then, so this budget item was, ran through the RSA Board of Supervisors, the big board, or how did we come up with this number?
So we do provide our budget recommendation to the road service area boards, and they review them. Some of them choose to pass resolutions in support of it or to recommend adjustments to it. They haven't seen this amendment that I'm aware of, or have had an opportunity to review it or comment on it or analyze it.
Thank you. And then I guess I just have one comment about overtime and wages and everything in general. I build roads for a living. Last year, I made about $50,000 in straight time and about $70,000 in overtime. So my overtime earnings are in excess of my regular time earnings. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, Mr. Yount, your secondary amendment.
Yeah, and I'd like to speak to it first here. So I really appreciate where Moki's going with this. We've had, since this came about, Mr. Brown and I have had some good discussions on really headed in the right direction, trying to head in the right direction, trying to create a system that's better for the taxpayer and the consumer. One that maybe does lower the overhead a little bit. A system where hopefully the calls come in will be logged, maybe by a third party, possibly. We've discussed, there's a million different ways to go with. We don't really know where it's going to go. I have the utmost trust that Mr. Brown will figure out a good system. It worries me to lower it by such a substantial amount, just based on, we got to go back to work here tomorrow, right? We got to live with this decision immediately. I like where Moki's going with it. I would support it if the number was a reasonably little bit lower amount. And so I was going to see if we could lower that. I'd like to bring forth an amendment by striking 150,000 and then inserting 125,000. And my thoughts behind that is that it does, that number of 125 is actually lower than what was spent in the last year. So, but it's enough that we can keep going until we create a solution and a better system. And that was my thinking behind it. So that's it.
Can I get a clarification on that? Are you just reducing it by $25,000? Okay.
And your benefits will change too. Okay, let's talk about that amendment, secondary amendment of Mr. Yount's, going down to 125,000 in the first bullet, 125,000, excuse me. Ms. Nowers?
I would just say that's an improvement. I don't understand why we think it's okay. I understand thinking it's a problem. I don't understand why you think it's okay to do this without running it by the RSA boards. There are input on this. And if they, if you run it by them and then you hear their concerns and then you disagree with them, you can come to this body and we can all agree with you. But they haven't even had a chance. Like, I could only talk to one of them. They can't even, meet and speak for the board. So, and one of them had an RSA board meeting tonight, so they couldn't even testify on this. So I disagree with the whole process. I mean, at least 125 preserves it. And I would say the other thing that they told me is this OT issue has come up before. And one of the solutions over time was to have the supervisors have to approve any OT. And they said that didn't work. It slowed things down and they weren't happy with that. So, I mean, it sounds like this issue has been, come at a couple of ways. And I don't think it's right for this body to just on the fly do things and ignore the boards that are there to us. So I think this amendment it needs to come back, but I'll support 125 just so we can move down the road and not seriously impair things.
Okay, on the reduction from 150 to 125 is what we're on right now. So, Ms. Bobby, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I agree with Assemblymember Nowers. I have 7, 8, I don't even know, RSAs in my district. I attend a lot of their meetings. These are really intelligent people who work really hard to engage with their communities. They have a really good feel for what the needs are. And I just think it's not our place to then at the last minute come in and second guess what they feel they need. Thank you.
Anybody else on the secondary amendment? Mr. Sumner?
We'd be reducing the overtime by 25,000 and the benefits by 11,024 or something.
Yep, you got it.
Okay.
What was that? What was that final benefit number?
It's exactly 11,024.
But,
Okay.
so I would support this, but I would say that I think that we should actually think about potentially starting some sort of different system for answering the road hotline. And potentially we could still have the road supervisors, but we could have the road hotline answered by an answering service that transcribes the messages. And there's a human on the other line. I think perhaps me and Assembly Member Yunt have or have in the past used these sort of answering services that will take calls day and night, 24/7. And they'll transcribe the calls and email you the transcripts of all the calls with people's contact and all that. And it's a human being that lives here. So if it's an actual emergency, they also know who to get a hold of in the case of an emergency. And so potentially something like that might really address the situation. But I don't know that it'd be advisable to strike out all the overtime for 14 employees, and probably not a great idea. So I'll support this, but I hope we look into maybe some changes on that front.
Let's see, we're on the secondary numbers now. Mr. Yunt?
I'd just like to clarify some math here. So by reducing it from 150 to 125, that's a sixth. 1/6 of a year is 2 months. So this would give us 10 months to get something figured out. It's actually better than that though, because we didn't spend 150 last year. We only spent 144. So we'd be reducing them by 19 for simple math, call it 18. You're looking at a month and a half. So really this shouldn't take effect for about 10 and a half months. And we've got a great manager. I have no doubt in my mind that, by reducing it to 125 isn't going to put us in an emergency state, but it gives Mike and team plenty of time to, to figure out something.
Right. Ms. Manager?
So through the mayor to the assembly, I agree with Mr. Tu. I think there are things that we should look at, and to Mr. Sumner's point as well, around revising the system to bring the overtime down. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. We already are doing that. I think we communicated in a weekly post previously that we will be rolling out this problem reporter app. That takes care of it on a digital front. So if you got a smartphone or a computer and you want to go down that road, that's great. But what we still have to sort out is when somebody wants to make a phone call. And it's a little bit complicated because most people don't know what road service area they're in. So we have to be able to figure that out so that we know what contractor to route it to. So we'll sort that out. We're already in the process of putting a digital platform in place. Staff are testing that this summer. We intend to have it in place before this next winter season. So we already are kind of leaning in that direction. But as Mr. Yunt alluded to, it's going to take a little bit of time to make that adjustment. But I agree with the sentiment that we would want to reduce these overtime expenses and find a more efficient system.
Mr. Tu, we're still on the secondary numbers now.
I'm going to support the $25,000 reduction. I think what we've done is I've probably made my point here. 3 people got all the overtime. It's not over 14 people. It's not over 12. It's over 3 people. And then another thing, I don't think every subject needs to go in front of the community in the RSA boards to discuss. We have things that we discuss in the back room. These issues may only need to be discussed amongst us. I think they give us the power to see what needs to be said and be cut or whatever, and that's what I exercise. But I will support 125 because I think I made my point.
Call the question.
Okay, we're on the secondary amendment, going from striking 150,000 and putting in 125,000. I didn't catch that benefit number. You want to read that?
And by
11.
reducing the amount of benefits by $11,024.
Okay. Any objection to the secondary amendment passing? Ms. Bovee objects, so Madam Clerk, the vote.
Mr. Mayor, it passed with Assemblymember Bovee opposed.
Okay, so amendment number 14 has been amended to $125,000 and a change in benefits. Any further discussion? I will say, my first job in the Matsu Borough was to get on the Trapper Creek Road Board. I can't remember what year it was. I want to say 1984, 1985, or 1986. I learned a lot right away. I was going to change everything. Boy, it was a mess. And I found out that there's a function of the road boards, there's a function of these contracts, and there's a function of the supervisors. And the ability of the supervisors to put all this together and through Mr. Dolan is really something. The road service area is kind of like the fire service. It's kind of an archaic system. We've got all these little geographic areas in the borough because we don't have the powers ourselves. I'm really skeptical over this amendment, more than any other amendment I've ever seen. Just micromanaging what Mr. Brown and Mr. Dolan could do is not a good thing for the assembly. It just absolutely is not. And, if you want to address this issue, then you should do it through Mr. Brown and do it through Mr. Dolan and come up with something and present it back to but just to go after money that you really don't realize how it's allocated and why it's allocated. We have snowbanks up in my place right now that are still 6 feet deep, which means to me, there was a heck of a lot of work done by the road service area contractors. And I saw the supervisors many times trying to do their job day and night. It doesn't just snow during the daytime. It doesn't snow at 8 to 5 or anything like that. So this amendment, I've never seen one that really truly micromanages or saddles Matsu Borough's employees and divisions so much. So that's what I think of this amendment. Ms. Nowers?
First of all, I'm just wondering what job you haven't done.
I didn't make it very long on that road board. They said I was too grouchy.
Second of all, we have very few people, I just want to respond to Mr. Tu. We have very few people who take the time to participate in the public process, to inform themselves, to take hours out of their day to do things. And this just completely says, well, why are you even spending all that time to do that? I mean, I participated in some of these RSA meetings. I see the thought that goes into those. And so I can't support that from a public. I think it's very disrespectful to those boards to do it this way. And then if you got a good idea, shop it through them and, don't be afraid to put it out there and get that public comment. And then we might all disagree because we're looking at it from a different perspective, but it's not fair to them to not give them the opportunity to do it. So I appreciate that, hey, maybe there's a better way to do things, but we got to involve the public. We can't just sit up here and in our own little bubbles decide that's the way to do it. So I won't be supporting this. I think you should come back and maybe we can, work through it and maybe there is a better way to do it. Maybe not.
Why don't somebody call a question?
You can just ask if there's any objection.
Is there any objection to amendment number 14 as amended? There is objection.
Mr. Mayor, it passed with Assemblymember Hale, Assemblymember Nowers, and Assemblymember Bovee opposed.
Passes as amended. Okay, the next page 5, amendment 15, right? Amendment 15. Mr. Sumner.
I move to amend the non-area-wide fund to decrease the mill rate from 0.490 to 0.432 for a decrease in property tax revenue of $500,000. And I would speak to it. So this was really the intent of my previous amendment. Possibly that was a bit too much of a micromanaged situation. I didn't intend to reduce the operations at all of the library or animal care, but I was attempting to address a situation that has been ongoing for a number of years, which is that we budget more money for those operations. And essentially that is most of the non-area-wide fund, especially since we reduced or eliminated economic development, is animal care and the libraries. And every year we pass a budget that allocates more money than is actually spent at those operations, which is understandable. I mean, obviously they can't spend more money than they're appropriated, but they do spend less than is appropriated every year. So we've built a considerable fund balance in the non-area-wide fund, which the audited fund balance in June of 2020, I believe is the last audited fund balance, was in excess of $2.4 million, which represents, I don't know, somewhere around 40% of the revenue that we receive for the entire non-area-wide fund, which I would describe as an excessive amount of money to be held in reserve, particular for something that is not a critical function of the borough. And certainly we could appropriate money from the general fund should there be some sort of a library or animal care emergency as a loan to the non-area-wide. But I do believe that essentially everybody outside the cities has paid more tax than they've received in service. And I think that's inarguable by $2.4 million. That's money that was collected from the taxpayers. It wasn't spent. It wasn't spent at the libraries. It wasn't spent at the animal care center or shelter. And I think we should return some of that surplus fund balance to the taxpayers. And with the understanding that this is not a permanent decrease in the non-area-wide tax, but I do think we need to address the fund balance that we built. And so I also went back and I looked at the actuals, the audited fund balance each year. And I think from 17 to 18, it grew by 300,000. From 18 to 19, it grew by about 500,000 if you don't include the 1.2 million that was transferred to capital projects. Then from 19 to 20, it grew by 900,000. So operationally speaking, we've been overshooting by more and more and more. And I think it's plenty safe to return to the taxpayers half of what our projected fund balance will be for the fiscal year 22, especially in light of the fact that we've been well under, or we always have more money than what is projected. Thank you.
Let's see, Mr. Yount, then Mr. Hale and Mrs. Bovee.
So when I first seen this amendment, there was two things that crossed my mind. One, that Jesse was probably not going to bring forth the library one, and not at all in my heart do I believe Jesse was trying to pick on the libraries. I think this was the direction he was headed in. So I'm glad that you spoke to those numbers. I too pulled those numbers. Those are, not going down to dollars and cents, but that audited fund balance, those are good numbers that Jesse just gave. The 500,000, I needed to go pull those numbers from the last 4 or 5 years so that I could look and see if that would be a huge amount or an average amount. So, I feel comfortable with this based on the fact that last year that fund balance grew by 900,000. The year before it was by 500, but it would have been 1.7 million had it not had a transfer the year before by 300. So I think 500 is fine. We still have 2.4 in there. And it's probably still going to grow past 2.4 with this 500. So we got to remember, I think if you stood up 100 taxpayers and said, and you asked them, would you like good services for your taxes? All 100 would say yes. But then if you asked them, would you like us to continuously overtax and turn you into an investor of the Matsu Borough, probably most would say no. And so when I first seen the 500,000, I was a little concerned just based on, I had not reviewed all these audited fund balances. After I reviewed them, I feel very comfortable with this amount. And so Jesse, I thank you for leaving the library situation alone. I know that wasn't your intent to just go after them. And this makes a lot more sense. And I think it's something that everybody can understand better. And I appreciate what you're trying to do. So I will be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the mayor to the finance director. Assuming everything else remains the same with this reduction in mill rate, what would be the projected fund balance in non-area wide at the end of the fiscal year?
Through the mayor to Assembly Member Hale, the projected fund balance after this amendment would be $546,745.
Thank you. I will be supporting it.
Let's see, Ms. Bovee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'm the one who's not keeping up here. I'm the one who doesn't exactly understand. This still seems to me like it is a backdoor way of cutting animal care and the library. So can you explain to me how this would work?
Through the mayor to Assembly Member Bovee, what we are doing is reducing revenues. We're leaving the budgets for animal care in the libraries alone and utilizing fund balance as the revenue source.
So what is the purpose of the fund balance? I mean,
fund balance, consider it like your savings account. It's your revenues less your expenditures growing over time. So over time, Assembly Member Summers right, this has grown over time. It is not, 500,000 is not an unreasonable amount to have in fund balance here.
so would we need to raise this non-area-wide mill rate significantly next year after we eat this fund balance this year?
Again, depending on how much lapses from their budgets in fiscal year 21, we will know when we budget next year how much will be left over. Right now, we have a loss budgeted, but if the animal care or the libraries come in under budget, that excess would go into fund balance. So it could increase ending fund balance more than what we projected.
Thank you.
Let's see, Ms. Nowers, then Mr. Sumner.
So kind of following up on Assemblywoman Bovee's comments. So at some point, if we lower this, theoretically, our fund balance would be somewhere around 500,000 at the end of this year. And then if things were exactly equal, it would be, and we stayed with this mill rate and kind of nothing else changed, we might be at zero for a fund balance. And then we'd have to look at it increase if we wanted to have.
Through the mayor to Assembly Member now, eventually, yes. As budgets are consistently underspent, though, that utilization of fund balance is less than what is projected, so
right.
It would take time.
Understood. So is there any sort of financial guidelines for a percentage that is good to strive for in fund balance in that? And then I have a follow-up question for the manager.
Through the mayor to Assembly Member Nowers. There are a variety of recommendations. GASB does recommend 6 months worth of expenditures in your fund balance. However, 25% is a lower threshold for that, and that is allowable.
Okay. And then for this fund balance that we've had in the past, like, do you have any concerns about allowing this to go below a certain point? And what have there been, fund balance sometimes is there for the unexpected things. So I'm just wondering, is there anything that has been, paid out of this in the past that comes to mind, we might want to keep in mind for where we set this, what we think is a good amount of fund balance?
Through the mayor to Assemblymember Nowers. No, I don't have an issue with that. I think what's created this problem to some degree has been somewhat self-inflicted with hiring freezes, spending freezes. Then there's been some challenges specifically like in animal care, for example, in just filling positions. Mr. Hayes, I thought, addressed that really well the other night and kind of talked about that. So because this is non-area wide, it's kind of segmented off from the area wide budget. So you can kind of drill down and see the numbers just a little bit easier because it's not complicated by all these other departments and divisions. So I think this makes sense. I think to Mr. Sumner's point, we recognize it's temporary, but a lot of that, and to Ms. Heindel's point about what lapses is going to be how well we execute the budget. So if we execute what we have budgeted, then we probably won't be lapsing as much, but some of that's going to depend on our ability to fill positions and keep them filled in terms of how that plays out. I think we have some discussions ongoing about how we might budget differently in the future. That may help kind of draw that down a little bit and plan for some of these vacancies and things that we do see happen consistently.
Okay, based on that and based on, having $1 million in there now and, maybe it'll be a little bit over, I think this is an okay thing to do at this time with a, reevaluation next year. I just want to avoid swinging somebody's tax bill too much, going down $200 and then going up 300. So, but this looks like something we could manage and then reevaluate next year.
Mr. Manager, how much did you reduce the non-area wide mill rate in your proposed budget from last year?
I believe it's from 0.5111 or 0.511 to 0.49. So that represented about a 4.1% decrease, if I remember correctly.
How many positions are open at the animal care facility now?
I'm going to defer to the expert.
Yeah.
George Hayes, Deputy Manager and Acting Animal Care Director. To the Mayor, we have actually 5 positions that are vacant right now, but 2 of those were recommended to hire on Monday. Chris Loskar, the new director, to start on the 18th, that is. He chaired a board and hired 2 individuals, but with the process, there'll be about 2 weeks. So really, there's only going to be 3 vacant ones. And we've got the manager position closed now. And so we should be able to hire that one within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And the other 2 on-call positions, we put the requisition back out today for those 2, and we're hoping to hire those within about a 4-week process.
So this amendment, you're okay with this amendment, getting into the next budget cycle?
I am, because this is coming out of the fund balance.
Right.
And doesn't affect the animal care budget, so I am okay with that.
You can make it a year and look at it again.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's see, who was next? Mr. Sumner, then Mr. Young.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one more thing. Our projected fund balance for 6/30/2020 in our 2019, or excuse me, in our 2020 budget was 157,000, but our audited fund balance for 6/30/2020 was $2.4 million. So, and given the fact that there was 5 vacant positions in animal care, I'm fairly confident that we can afford to do this as a one-time measure, at least possibly next year, but I would only guarantee once.
Mr. Yant?
Based on, I wanted to touch on a couple things. So this 2.4 million that we have there right now that I'm pretty sure is going to grow coming up because of all these vacancies. But let's say it didn't. The 2.4 million represents about 60%. So the GFO looks for 50. We could go as low as 25. We're at about 60 right now. Okay. We grew by 900 the year before, 1.7 million the year before, then we transferred 1.2 to capital projects. So I don't think this is setting us up for failure in any way, shape, or form. That's all.
Mr. Chu?
Can I call a question?
Okay. Any objection to calling the question? Any objection to passing amendment number 15? Doesn't look like there's any objection, so 15 has passed. That was a good debate on 15, and the facts speak for themselves, so it was a good amendment, Mr. Summer. Let's see where we're at now. 15, let's take a break. How about that?
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Let's get back on, oh, I don't have a clerk. What happened to my clerk?
No attorney.
No attorney? We can do it. Can we start without the clerk? Probably not, huh? Are we on record? Okay, we're on record. We'll go without the clerk. Madam Clerk. Okay, it is about 9:28. No, 8:28, excuse me. So we're on amendment number 16, page 6. Mr. McKee.
I move to amend the capital project grants area-wide ambulance division by striking new command vehicles 3 in the amount of $180,000. And my reasoning for striking this is there was nothing put forward why we need new command vehicles. The simple fact that you keep a vehicle for a period of time, since we have a full mechanic shop, there's absolutely no reason why a command vehicle could not reasonably be expected to last 20 years. The idea, unless to get simply because a vehicle is 5 years old, you don't trade it in and get another vehicle. It doesn't make sense to do that. In fact, I know I don't do that, and I don't think anybody at this DS up here does that. Okay.
Maybe we should hear about these command vehicles.
Good evening, Director of Emergency Services. So these vehicles are emergency vehicles. My own vehicle can have well over 100,000 miles, and that's okay. But when you put that kind of miles on an emergency vehicle that you expect to get to a location, that's where the problem comes in. It's just like our ambulance replacements. We're going to be needing ambulances every year to replace it. It's due to the miles. It's miles, hours, and maintenance cost. We have a shop foreman. No vehicles get replaced unless they're approved by the shop foreman. And he reviews them. He looks over are they 5 years old? If they're 5 years or older, they come off the first line. They're not first line any longer. 10 years and older, we start looking at the miles. At 100,000 miles, we bring them in and do a complete service on them and see if everything's okay. He pulls up the maintenance records. Right now, we cover from mile 202 of the Parks Highway all the way to Lake Louise. These vehicles are on the road every day, and these are what the paramedics use to get to the call. They're a first line defense. These 3 vehicles, one of them has 170,000 miles on it. The other one has 201,000 miles on it. And the other one has 167,000 miles on it. So that's, when we get to that point, the cost of them, the maintenance, and then they get older parts and et cetera. So that's how we base it off of. That's what the recommendation is for national standard for emergency vehicles. And that's what our shop foreman goes by. And he's very strict on what gets replaced. We can go from a first line to a support vehicle. And then we have some that go down to it. When they get to higher miles, to 200,000, we can put them into for training use. In other words, getting to areas to conduct training. But every day, these are what's on the road responding to all the calls. So that's why we need to replace them. And that's a continuous expense with our emergency vehicles and the amount of calls and the amount of time they're on the road.
Okay, so I've got Ms. Bovee, Mr. Yount, and then Mr. Hale.
So these trucks will still be in fleet. They just won't be used by the first responders. Is that correct?
These 3 will not. These will be turned in. One of them was in an accident and it's never been right since. So that one, we can't. The one with 167,000 miles, that one we were hoping to keep, but there's a valve or a rod knocking in the engine. So we're at the point of either doing engine replacements or replacing the vehicle on that one. So these vehicles will be turned in.
So they have serious issues.
Yes.
Thank you.
The cost is over exceeding the value of the vehicle.
Mr. Yant?
Thank you. Through the mayor. First of all, I wish Amendment 17 was actually in front of 16 because that one, I think it's possible that the vehicle on Amendment 17 is older than Jesse Sumner. But we'll get back to we'll get back to 16. Okay, it's real close if it's not. So so I was going to ask if this would grow or replace the fleet, but you've already answered that question. So as well as some other questions. I was pretty nervous when I seen this one. We have a huge, I'm starting to dig into the insurance, and that's what I plan to really work on the next 6 months is the Mat-Su Boroughs insurance stuff when we slow down here and get through budget season. But so I was pretty concerned when I first seen this, I'm not gonna lie. Were we gonna be growing the fleet? Were we just buying vehicles when we didn't maybe wear out the previous, right? Having heard what you said, it does seem to make sense. I don't want to be replacing motors. It's expensive. Fuel mileage on new vehicles is a ton better than older vehicles, right? So, there's some carrying costs and some maintenance costs that we could get rid of. But I do want to ask if say you didn't get all of this, if you just got one or two, is there one of these that could maybe work another year? Or, I mean, I don't want to make it work like we did with the 17th Amendment one, but
it's hard because the worst thing we want is to be going to a call and we're broke down.
Yeah.
We've had it happen in ambulances. We've actually on the highway had to transfer a patient to another ambulance because one broke down. That's why we started the refurb program that the Assembly approved 5-6 years ago, and we haven't had a breakdown since then.
Good.
So, we look at our own vehicles. Mine has over 200,000, one of mine. I wouldn't drive it to Fairbanks, but I drive it, in town. But that's different if I break down. If a paramedic breaks down going to the call or an ambulance, it's not good. If you see one on a tow truck, it's a bad day.
So to build on what I talked about with the insurance, just to reiterate, these three will be sold. That way they'll come off of our balance sheet and they'll no longer be on our insurance.
And the money we get from them will go back to the area-wide funds.
Yes.
Okay. And then, that's all I got. Thank you.
Mr. Hale?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I take my truck in every 5,000 miles as recommended by the manufacturer. And when I hit 99,900 miles, I trade it in. And the only thing I got to do with it is get to work 6 days a week.
Okay, Mr. Sumner?
So the command vehicles, those are the like SUVs that you see driving around, not the ambulance looking things?
Yes,
or-
sir. That's correct.
Okay. And what is the function of those?
So these are we have a Medic 1 and a Medic 4, and we have a deputy chief. They have first response vehicles. Medic 1 is located in Station 6-1 right in the heart of Wasilla, but they're responsible for everything up from Lake Louise all the way to Willow that Medic 1 is responsible for. So that vehicle will go, if it's a I'll call it a Band-Aid run, they wouldn't go, but if it's serious, they go. Medic 4 is located in Talkeetna at the Y at Station 11-9. So Medic 4 covers all the way to mile 202 of the highway, Talkeetna, Trapper Creek, and all that area. So that's what these vehicles are.
And so they can usually get there like before the ambulance? or-
That's exactly right. They're usually there before the ambulance, geographic though, depending on location, because if we get a call in Palmer or Sutton, then we have an ambulance there that'll get there before they do, because they're coming generally from Wasilla, depending on what their location is at the time. And then if they're on one call and the other one sounds worse, then they'll divert to that call. So it's kind of where they're at the time. But they call them chase vehicles, as terminology is used a lot. But those vehicles are the ones that your high-end medics, your Medic 1s, Medic 4s are your paramedics. And they're the ones that are going to the call.
Okay, Mr. Yant?
I'm learning a lot tonight, so I appreciate that. But you say that a lot of times these get there before the ambulances and they've got medics in them. Are they obviously probably, I assume, got some gear in there where they can respond appropriately
They
instead of
are,
just waiting?
that's correct, Senator Yunt. That there are ALS, Advanced Life Support. They have everything in that vehicle to sustain life. They just don't transport. That's
Oh, I
what the
see.
ambulance does at that
Okay,
point.
I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on Amendment 16?
I'll call the question.
Okay. Any objection to calling the question? Seeing none, we will, any objection to passing Amendment 16? Okay, there's objection, so go ahead and vote.
Mr. Mayor, it failed with Assembly Member 2 opposed, or excuse me, do you mean? Or excuse me, in favor.
I went the wrong way.
Did you vote no?
I voted yes, but I think this is okay to go. That's what I want.
Okay, so you're in favor of this? Okay, so it's unanimous. It's unanimous that it's failed, right?
Amendment number 16 failed. Totally. Amendment number 17, now this is, page 7.
Number 17, Mr. Mayor.
17, page 7. Mr. McKee, got to turn your mic on and
Okay.
read it to us.
Move to amend capital project grant rescue by striking water rescue truck in the amount of $70,000. I'd like to speak to it. Again, why do we need this? We simply get these things in a budget and they say, oh, we need anything. If they asked me if they needed a Cadillac, would you give them that? No, you'd ask why they needed a Cadillac, right? So I'm saying, why don't we do that?
Mr. Manager wants to go first and then.
Yeah, so just for the record, because I don't know, I mean, just, it's really more, make sure the public understands this. In the proposed budget, we do provide the capital list. It starts on page 501. But if you flip over to page 510 and 511, there's a narrative description for each one of these capital projects. So, and maybe it's not ideal, but like, for example, on the last one, it talks about the 3 vehicles over 150,000 miles, 1 over 200,000. So there are some narratives and a justification that's provided in the proposed budget that attempts to describe why we're asking for that. Just wanted to make sure that was clear for the record.
Thank you.
Ken Barkley, Director of Emergency Services. So this, the vehicle we're wanting to replace, we've been wanting to do it for quite a few years. What it is this is a vehicle that tows the boats to the water rescue. What we're using is a retired ambulance. I just forgot the year, 93, I think. 1980s ambulance, not the Ghostbusters, but it's close. This is what we're using to tow the boats. I have directed them not to put on their lights and sirens when responding because it doesn't go fast enough. The other thing is it's 2-wheel drive. So if you're ever docking a boat and you don't have 4-wheel drive, you're going to dock your vehicle and the boat in the water.
Okay.
So that's what this is.
Okay, that's good enough for me.
You want to?
I'll withdraw.
Okay, amendment number 17 has been withdrawn. Any objection to withdrawing this amendment? Seeing none, amendment 17 is withdrawn by request of Mr. McKee. So is that number still 17 now?
Yes, because we have to record it.
Okay, so the next page is amendment number 18.
Yes, I move to amend capital project grant rescue by striking the rescue tool modernization and replacement in the amount of $250,000. And I want to speak to this. Look, we have throughout the course of about the last 6 months, we have received a fair amount of money from the state for equipment and what have you that we just automatically put in there. And there's a good reason for that. So what precisely are we going to spend $250,000 on?
Mr. Brown, Mr. Barkley?
Ken Barkley, Director of Emergency Services. So our hope was, and we did submit it 2 times or 3 times to get it under COVID, and it was denied each time. We tried to get this under COVID. So she denied it. So I tried. So these tools, what's happened is the fire service, let's see. So fire service area has been augmenting the cost of rescue. Rescue is area-wide. They shouldn't be doing that. And I have, over the last several years, we've been trying to upright that ship. So what we've done now is the fire service areas, we're not ordering rescue trucks. We haven't ordered a rescue truck since 2008. That was the last one we received. So we're ordering pumper rescue, engine rescue. So we're ordering trucks that are dual purpose now, and that makes more sense because we don't have enough people to pick up different vehicles, so we can bring one that has dual purpose. So the fire service areas are purchasing those trucks. They're paying for the trucks. Out of rescue for the tools, we're purchasing the tools to outfit the trucks for rescue. So if I was to have to buy a rescue truck for every fire service, which is where we're at right now, it would be over $5 million. And some areas would need more than one rescue truck. So instead of doing that, we've agreed we'll buy the tools for the truck just for rescue. If it has fire tools, they'll pay for those. So that's where we're at. This is 1/3 of what I actually need, but I'm trying to do it in increments instead of coming to you with a large number. So that's what it is. The other part of this is our tools are antiquated. We haven't purchased tools in a very long time for rescue. These are the tools that are jaws of life. These are the ones that cut people out of cars. This is our water rescue equipment, hazmat. It's all that equipment, but they've changed the way they do things. So right now, you'll see a hydraulic pump, hoses, fittings, and then the tool. Those are not, you can't get parts for them anymore, and that's what we have. You can't order parts no longer. So it's all battery operated now. So all the tools are battery operated, which is great because if we have over the embankment calls or we have an airplane wreck that's out in the middle of the woods, we can use a 4-wheeler and take these tools in, and we don't need a cord following us. So that's why we're asking for this money. It's actually a cost savings, and over the next 3 to 4 years, we'll have all the tools that we need on the apparatus. So that's why I'm doing this.
Mr. McKee?
One of the reasons why I'm asking you these questions is I asked the finance director to go through and go for 2019 and 2020, January 1 to January 1, and to find out, in fact, just the calls we get on ambulances. Do you know that our change, that has only increased 2% in 24 months, that your calls have only gone up 2% in 24 months?
I don't think you have the right information. Is that what you gave me, manager? That
Yes.
was,
This is the figures that they did billable and total and non-billable.
you're talking about ambulance billing.
Yeah.
This has
No,
nothing.
I'm talking about total calls, 9,000 of them.
Mr. McKee, the sheets I gave you were for ambulance calls only.
Oh, okay, yeah, but I mean, it wasn't for, you gave me for total ambulance calls, correct? Okay, and that has only increased 2%. So I was absolutely staggered by that because I kept thinking, well, we're talking about adding everything on the basis that we have more calls and what have you, and actually we don't.
That's billing. That's for billing for EMS, not our calls. Our ambulance calls have gone up 30%, but that has nothing to do with rescue. That's total separate.
But I'm going to give you this when I leave here. No, what she gave me was total calls.
That's not what that is. It's for billing. It's total calls that were billed.
No, it isn't. It's for billed and unbilled, Mr. Buckley. In fact, Your unbilled are, what? It's on the bottom here. It's about 1,000 less.
Through the mayor to Assemblymember McKee, those are for the ambulance runs that we receive personal care records for, whether they're billed or not. We don't receive anything for rescue at all. So those are over and above, even if an ambulance responds to a rescue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barkley. Okay, Senator Mahale and Mr. Yant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was actually answered, but I will say, I've been to the Butte Fire Station and those electric rescue tools are really cool.
Mr. Yant.
This is a tough situation, so I battle this myself, and I'm sure Jesse does as well. So I still have my first nail gun from 1998. Unfortunately, I can't use it anymore because you can't get the parts. DeWalt battery tools from 20 years ago compared to 10 years ago, or it's not even comparable. 10 years ago to now, it's even 3 years ago, DeWalt's, it's unspeakable, the advancements they've made. So what I want to ask you is your guys' tools that you have, that you've kept in service for a long time, just like all of us probably try to do, can you even repair them anymore? Do you guys make an attempt? I know you have a diesel mechanic shop where you try to work on your vehicles and everything, but do you work to actually continue the life of the tool through addressing parts and pieces on it, or do you guys just, when it stops working, buy a new one? If you could please give
Through
some
the
detail on that.
assembly, mayor to Assemblymember Yunt. So our mechanics are level 1 technicians. So they can repair anything on the tool except inside the tool. When you get into the pump, they can repair everything else. The problem is we can't get parts anymore. Manufacturers, you know how it works. They, oh, we don't make that style no more. Well, that battery don't fit no more. So you have to get new ones. And that's what's happened to us. The hose reels, they don't even have hydraulic lines no more. You can't even get them and the fittings for our tools. They don't make them anymore. But when battery tools came out, we got them as a demo and they weren't even strong enough. They wouldn't even last. Now we can do everything we need with them. So it's much advanced.
Yeah, I will say for sure, battery tools a while ago didn't work very well, and now they're unbelievable. So in fact, our sighting crew, subcontractor, doesn't even use guns anymore. They only use battery, and it makes it all through the day. But you answered that question. I was just curious, like I said, if you guys were trying to maintain your tools and at least do the best you can to extend the life.
Absolutely.
My last question is, you mentioned that this was about a third of what you had needed. Do you have anybody that advises you on what you need, or is those decisions that just you make, or so?
Deputy Director Davis makes those decisions. He's in charge of rescue. We are fortunate enough that our companies give us tools to try out. And we actually have classes. They'll come up and demo them for us, leave them with us, and we actually invite all the fire departments, and then Director Davis has a team, and then they take and look at every tool, benefits, pros, cons, and then they make a decision. So absolutely. One of them that we thought we were going to go with, actually we ended up changing because their service department was no good, so it wasn't reliable.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Sumner, did you have something, or?
Yeah, through the mayor, I'm just looking at this call list here, and I can't help but notice that in fiscal year 19, or in 2019, Butte had 191 calls, and then in 2020, they only had 24, and basically after January on this 19 one, or maybe February, they just stopped having like really any calls. It like fell off a cliff. So did you guys like stop answering their calls?
What
or-
you're looking at is not our call volume.
Can I answer? Through the mayor to Assemblymember Sumner, what happens is they realign where their ambulances are. This form was developed when we had ambulance sitting at all those different areas. Now we keep ambulances more centrally located, and then they respond to certain areas. So you will see probably that Central and some of the other core areas have
I-
increases.
I do see an increase in Palmer on here.
Yes.
That is about corresponding, yeah. Or central. And then my other question was, how many water rescues do you guys do approximately a year? And how many successful water rescues have you guys carried out?
So we average about 35 calls a year. That's a real tough one. What do you call success? So if we go to a river and it's a drowning call and we grab somebody out of the water and save them, that's a success. If we get there, it's a fatality and we recover the body for the family, that's a success.
I suppose, how many people do you guys rescue from drowning? Would be my question.
I'm sorry.
How many calls do you get where somebody is rescued as opposed to just retrieval?
That's, I don't have those numbers. I mean, over half. I can use the latest one was in Talkeetna. 3 went in just last week or earlier this week, Sunday actually. Sunday, 3 went in and 2 self-rescued and 1 we rescued down further. So he was hung up on a sandbar. Thank goodness he had a life jacket on. That's what saved him. But we went and with another charter company helped us get him out. So that was a rescue.
Okay, amendment number 18. You want to proceed, Mr. McKee?
I'll withdraw that.
Okay, so number 18 has been withdrawn. Any objection? See no objection. 19, Mr. McKee, page 9. Did you find it?
Yeah. No, I'll withdraw that.
19 has been withdrawn. Any objection?
He hasn't moved it, so he doesn't have to withdraw it. He's just not moving it.
I wanted to withdraw it. Okay.
Because it doesn't have a number.
So it's messed up our number system again. Okay, so 19 is on page 10. Okay, so it's, Mr. Yount. Page, it's the technical one, page 10, amendment 19.
I move to amend the area-wide fund, mayor benefits 412s by striking 138,038 and inserting 154,768 in its place for an increase of 16,730. And the area-wide fund, information technology expense reimbursement outside the Matsu Borough by striking 30,370 and inserting in its place 13,640 for a decrease of $16,730. So
I'll just exit the room for briefly and Madam Bovee can handle it. Shouldn't take you long.
Sorry. So when the mayor's budget was increased on May 11th, what I didn't take into consideration was that it increases the benefits. And so that's what this would do. So my apologies for not bringing that to the table in the first place.
Assemblymember Nowers.
Maybe the clerk can help me with this. These seem really different to me, and I'd like to move to split them. I don't know if that's splitting the question, but so that we consider each of these separately.
If I could just explain real quick, Deputy Mayor Bovee, what Assemblymember Yunt is doing is these funds coming out of IT are funds that they said they no longer needed.
Correct, but it's not linked to the mayor's salary, which I realize is also a technical,
Okay.
but I'm being asked to vote on to me, what are 2 separate issues, so I'm asking to split those.
So okay, they're both coming out of the area wide.
Correct.
Okay.
This is how Assemblymember Yunt is paid for. Exactly, through the mayor to Assemblymember Nowers. Since IT Tuesday night said that they had an excess of
expense reimbursement outside the borough. We reduced their expense to cover the mayor's benefits. So yeah, they're coming from different departments, but the net effect of this entry or this amendment is zero.
And I support one, but not the other, which is why I'm asking to split it.
So the motion would be to move to divide the question.
Thank you. I move to divide the question.
Does anybody else want to speak to dividing the question? Is that what we're up to?
That's what we're on right now.
An objection to dividing the question?
Yes, there is. I want to vote on it.
Clerk.
So through the deputy mayor, if it is debatable, I suppose I would debate it. It's really a different question if it's unfunded to me than if it is funded. So, I mean, I might object to the whole concept of the mayor's salary if we're doing an additional 16,000 unfunded. So I would object to the
So if
division
we
of the
divide the question and begin with the second part of the amendment,
Well,
can we
I
do
mean,
that?
I object to dividing the motion to divide the question.
We do have to end up voting on whether the division of the question occurs.
All right, let's vote on whether or not to divide the question.
Can I speak to it?
Assemblymember Nowers.
I'm going to reset it so Assemblymember Nowers can speak before everybody votes.
I'm simply asking to divide the question because whether or not you support the mayor's salary, you're going to support the reduction in the expense reimbursement because we've been told that that's not needed. So I think what Assemblymember Bovey's saying is go ahead and vote on that. I don't think there's going to be any disagreement on it, and then allow me the courtesy of having a vote on what I consider to be a separate issue that I do not support, because the first one I don't think anybody objects to. So that's what I'm asking for, a courtesy to divide the question.
Assemblymember Sumner.
What order would we be taking up the motions in afterwards? Because that'll matter to me. First? Okay, I don't object.
Is that acceptable?
Well, we still need to vote on whether we're going to divide the question or not. And then what the order would be taken up is the first one would be the mayor's benefits. The second one would be taking 16th or the money out of IT's budget.
Assemblymember Sumner.
We just said,
Sumner.
Well, I couldn't hear anything because your guys' mics were
Then I do object if it's that order.
clarification through the clerk. We're asking if we can take up the second portion first and then take up the IT amendment and then take up the mayor.
That would be fine if that's part of the motion.
I would like to move to divide the question and allow us to take up the IT portion first and then the mayor's benefits.
Thank you.
Is there objection to dividing the question? Let's vote on dividing the question and taking the second part of the amendment first.
It has passed with Assemblymember 2 and McKee opposed. And then the item that the first segment that is before the assembly right now is taking $16,730 out of IT's budget.
Is there objection? Assemblymember Hale.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through the Deputy Mayor to the IT Director, is this acceptable?
Madam Mayor and Assembly, Eric White, IT Director, this is perfectly acceptable. When we looked at this the other night, there is actually more than this that we can reduce from that portion of the IT budget. And I believe that was suggested to take 41,000 out total.
So you say 41,000 total?
Yes.
Out?
Yes.
May I make a motion, secondary amendment to increase that to the 41,000?
Director Heindel.
Through the mayor or the deputy mayor to Assemblymember Hale, this budget item only has $30,370 in it. So you cannot take out more than
Right,
is
correct.
budgeted.
Check. So, I would like to make a secondary motion by striking 30370 and inserting in its place 0.
May I speak? May I speak to that? Okay. Yes, sir. So the 41,000 we looked at was actually a combination of 414,200 and 414,400. And so there's two line items when we looked at the 42,000. We were leaving some in each of those. So actually zeroing that one out, I could move money later from the other line item to this line item to use it. So that can be done, but it would take a little bit more administrative work later.
No, it's fine. I'll withdraw the motion. So,
Good question.
Madam Clerk, I'll withdraw my motion to place it to 0. So it would go back to the original decrease of 16,730.
Okay, so you're withdrawing your secondary amendment completely. So we do need to ask if there's any objection to the withdrawal of the secondary.
Is there any objection to withdrawal of the secondary? Now on the second amendment, second part of this amendment, is there any objection or
I
discussion?
think we've got Assemblymember Yant that would like to speak to it.
Okay, Assemblymember Yunt.
Thank you, Ms. Bovee. So the math here was recommended to me by the staff because this is what works, right? And so, and I supported Stephanie splitting this just out of respect, because if that's what she'd like to do, I think that's the right thing to do. So I support you in that. But at the end of the day, if we're going to increase the mayor's salary, we got to pay these benefits. It's just how it works, right? So I made a mistake. We're going to go back and revisit the whole thing. We can, and I'm totally fine with that. Or we're going to pay this because Ms. Cheyenne has to pay this, right? So she brought this to my attention after we all voted on it. It was my mistake, and I'll eat that. The bottom line is these both come out of the area wide. I respect that Stephanie wants to split it, but really at the end of the day, they go together. That's how it works, right? If we're gonna increase the salary, we increase the benefits. If we do that, we have to pay our bills. So that's really as simple as this is. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thanks.
Any further comments? Any objection to passing the second part of this amendment?
And that's the IT, taking 16,000, or the money out of IT's budget.
So that passes, and now we move to the first part of the amendment, correct?
That would be correct. It's to add the money for the mayor's benefits.
Any discussion? Assemblymember Sumner.
So just in theory, what happens if we pass the mayor's raise, fund it in the budget, but don't fund all the benefits? What would be the result?
Through the deputy mayor to Assemblymember Sumner, there would have to be a budget amendment out of the mayor's entire budget to increase benefits to cover the wages.
But what if there isn't?
Internally, once you pass the budget, we can do budget adjustments to make things work. So we would internally make that amendment because you are approving a total dollar amount, not just individual lines necessarily.
So it almost doesn't matter if we pass this or not. It's really truly a technical amendment.
I would say it's not a technical amendment because it hasn't been moved as a technical amendment. I could have brought it forward to you as a technical amendment with no offsetting decrease. And in that case, it would have been an increase to the mill rate. Had we brought it just separately with no alternative funding source. If you pass the budget without it in there, then we would look to the mayor's overall budget and reduce one of his other line items as a part of administrative procedure. Because bottom line is, we have to pay the benefits.
Assemblymember Young.
I got great news. We're not increasing the mill rate because we've already got it in the mill rate for the mayor's raise. We just took it out of the IT, which thank you very much for being honest on Tuesday and letting us know you had that in there. That means a lot to me. So whether it goes here or anywhere else, I appreciate that. So we can lower the mill rate if we don't approve this, right? But again, I want to eat my mistake. I brought forth a number without taking into consideration that there are other parts besides just the salary. So we can vote this down and let Cheyenne clean up our mess, or we can pass it. Either way, we are not increasing the mill rate. That is all I'm going to say for the rest of the night.
I doubt it. Assemblymember Sumner.
I do have one thing that I think will solve this. So this is essentially a technical amendment, and if there's an issue with the mayor's salary, I do believe, unless I'm wrong, the Assemblymember Yunt filed a reconsideration. Now, anybody can move the reconsideration at the next scheduled regular meeting if notice was filed. So it probably wouldn't be best to take up this issue by not passing a technical amendment to something that was already passed, but rather addressing it through reconsideration.
So I have a question. I guess if we pass this, which I feel we need to do because we did pass the salary increase. And then on Tuesday, we do not pass the salary increase. Do we go back and change?
Through the, to the deputy mayor, no, we would not. Code sets the mayor's salary. We're just approving what was approved the other night in code and then as amended Tuesday night. If you guys decide that the mayor's salary goes back to some other number less than $73,000, the budget would stay there, it would lapse in the following year. But we would not be paying the mayor based upon what's approved in the budget. We would pay the mayor based upon what's in the ordinance that you take back up on Tuesday night.
Thank you. I thought you were done.
I really didn't want to have to talk again. I know, I really didn't want to have to talk about this again, but my name may be Robert, but I'm no Robert's Rule master. So I have a technical question. Can I even take that up for reconsideration since it's past 5 p.m. yesterday? I don't think I can even reconsider that because I've been past my allotted time, so.
Through the deputy mayor to Assemblymember Yunt, what they were referencing is the or you're talking about reconsidering the motion to add funds in the budget, or are you talking about the ordinance now?
I'm talking about a couple nights ago, we passed an increase in the budget. I don't think I can take that up for reconsideration.
You did file for reconsideration. It's on the next meeting agenda.
So,
That was from,
that's for the ordinance. The ordinance sets the borough's mayor's wages.
right.
So if you come back next Tuesday night for the regular meeting with the reconsideration, which has been filed, and you guys change his wages, whatever is in that ordinance is what will be paid for his wages. The budget is just adopting a number to cover that amount that's.
And so where I was confused is one was on a regular meeting, one was on a budget, one's changing the code, one is a budget, right? So,
One's setting a number.
okay,
Just because we set a number we don't pay to the number.
right. So I will, yeah, so I see the number that I came up with 2 nights ago that Mr. Brown helped me with was that the average pay. We talked about that. I'm not gonna bring that number up for reconsideration. So.
Assemblymember 2.
Can we call the question?
Any objection to calling the question? Any objection to the first part of this amendment? There is an objection. We need to vote.
The second segment passed with Assemblymember Hale and Nowers opposed.
Somebody get the mayor?
The budget packet, Mr. Mayor.
So that was 19, okay? We've done 11. So the green packet's completed.
Yes.
The pink packet's completed.
Yes.
Okay. Have we had a mill rate?
We should probably ask if there's any more amendments. I know you don't want to, but we should.
The clerk's going to make me ask if there's any more amendments. Okay, there is, seeing none. There's no more amendments. Is there, if, now's the time if there is more amendments. No. Okay, I guess we'll go with no more. So we need the area-wide and non-area-wide.
It's going to be a number you like, Mr. Mayor.
9999.
Oh, it's more than that. Lower than that. Please tell us what it was.
And then Rob can ask what it was and what it was.
Okay, Ms. Heindel, what is the area-wide mill rate after amendments?
The area-wide mill rate after amendments is 9.942.
I rest my case. And the non-area-wide?
Non-area-wide mill rate is 0.432.
0.432. Okay. On that first page, Ms.
I'm working
Bovee,
on
could
it.
you move those mill rates for us?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to set the mill rates at 9.942 area-wide and 0.432 non-area-wide.
Okay, on that motion to set the mill rates, is there any objection to setting the mill rates at those rates, 9.942 and 0.432? See no objection, those mill rates are set. What's next, Madam Clerk?
Vote on the main motion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, on the ordinance serial number 21021, is there any objection to passing ordinance serial number 21021? See no objection, the new budget has just been passed by the Assembly, so let's give yourselves a little round of applause. So, congratulations. Okay, let's do some comments. Mr. Spropoulos, comments? No comment. Madam Clerk?
So, Mr. Mayor, we do have another meeting, deliberation meeting scheduled for next Thursday. However, the Assembly has up until 5 p.m. tomorrow to file for reconsideration. So I would like to get permission from the Assembly to wait until 5 p.m. tomorrow, and then I can send out an email canceling the meeting should I not receive a reconsideration.
How does vetoes work in this?
You have up until the next regular meeting.
Which is Tuesday?
Next Tuesday. I do have any possible mayoral vetoes on that agenda, so the Assembly could act on them next Tuesday, should you have any.
Okay, everybody understand that? With the reconsideration of the budget would be next Tuesday? Mr. Spropoulos?
Yeah, it may cause a wrinkle if a reconsideration is filed and then we have a regular meeting, because if reconsideration passes, on the following Thursday, your veto time would reset.
It'd be set at what then?
If reconsideration passes, the ordinance becomes active again. And so you would have a second opportunity to veto.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, comments, Mr. Manager?
So I just wanted to, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to share a number or a couple of numbers real quick. And I appreciate staff. And I want to say thanks to the staff, the directors, for all of their work in putting these budgets together and coming in here and taking questions on the fly. It's been a long 3 weeks, I think, where we've been doubling up on meetings. So I appreciate your all's effort in helping putting all this together. And really that process started back in January-ish. So I appreciate that. Just, you know, as I've been going through this process for the first time as manager, I'm learning things. So one of the things that kind of caught my eye that I thought I would share as we kind of wrap up the budget this year, at least for now. And when you look at just operating revenues and you strip out like school or debt service and all those other things, and you just look purely at operating budgets for the borough and its operations and the school district and its operations, the budgeted expenses, I'll make sure I say this correctly, for next year or for this in this proposed budget in FY22, what you all just approved, for the school district will be a 5.67% increase. The borough's budget, as was originally proposed to you, so basically what you've been working on for the borough operations alone, was a 0.024% increase over last year. With the reductions, it actually is a negative 1.1%, 1.2%. It's at 1.2% decrease in budgeted expenses from last year to this year. So I just want you to understand that. Like when you look at the operating alone, schools went up 5.67, the borough operations went down 1.2. I just wanted to share, because I think that's an interesting number. As you look at that, that's the challenge as we go through this process and make amendments, when you see how that money gets apportioned out in terms of making amendments and whatnot, based on the way code's currently set up now. And it's really just kind of a point about that 6.3 mil being hard in code makes it challenging when you get to this stage of the budget. So just something for us to consider potentially for next year as we kind of wade into that process. So to me, I thought that was a pretty interesting number as we were looking at it. And because I really wasn't paying attention to we knew we made cuts and we knew we had some increases in some areas, but what we brought to you as a proposed budget was 0.024% increase over what you approved last year. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
That'd be MSB 03-04-046. That needs to be a graduated, flexible mill rate so that the manager could fine tune a budget operating for the borough at the same time. Doesn't mean it change the funding, the school funding probably go up in any event, but it give it more flexibility in budgeting. Okay,
just for clarification for the record, I was just talking about area-wide. So I wasn't talking about service areas or any of that, just for clarification.
Okay. Ms. Nowers, you raise your hand, so we'll give you first comment.
I just had a question on that. So negative 1% increase for our budget would be like $1 million. Am I in the ballpark there? Less than last?
I have the sheet now. Go ahead. If you have the number, Cheyenne.
Through the Mayor to Assemblymember Nowers, borough operations in the current amended budget is $53,828,000. Borough operations in this approved budget is $53,189,000. So that's the difference.
I knew you'd have the exact. So
I have it exact, but it's easier to round up.
What is the
difference,
though? What is the difference?
The difference is the amendments. There was 651, from our original budget, let me start over. With the original budget, we were within $12,000 of prior year budget. After this, after the amendments, there was a $651,000 drop in the overall budget. So that's what makes up the difference.
That was
And I can
700
I can provide you all a copy of the
And that-
printout that the manager read.
Predominantly was the 772,000 NPI. Yeah. More comments, Ms. Nowers, or
Final comments, is that what you're?
final comments?
Final comments, Ron? Just really appreciate all the work that went into this budget. I think it's a good budget. I kind of feel like it came down to kind of how I did some of my college papers, like a weekend crash course. And, you know, if we're talking about improving processes, maybe we could look at our own process, like just do a better job of trying to get the amendments out there in front of the public and explaining why we're doing them. I mean, I didn't do it in mine. I could have done a better job of explaining what I was thinking, just to give the, you know, we had public hearings and then we closed public hearings and then like all of our amendments came in. That's really not like the best public process. So I don't know, maybe I don't want to mandate anything for anybody because I know there's special exemptions, you know, that come up and you have to do something, but maybe just improving our process for next year, trying to get ahead of the ball. And then just super happy to see the guidance on masks that folks can walk around free of them. And, you know, everybody's on that page, including the CDC. So I'm looking forward to the day when nobody has to wear them. We don't have to talk about it anymore.
Mr. Sumner, comments?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, well, maybe it's not the best process, but the process we followed while I've been here anyway is to bring amendments after the public hearings. So it's consistent, maybe not the best process, but the manager and mayor's comments almost make me want to file for reconsideration, but I think
Forget it down there.
but I probably won't. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Yount, comments?
Thank you guys for bearing with me. Obviously, I'm not a Robert's Rule master yet, so what an awesome process. I've been drinking from a fire hose the last 6 months, and I've probably chose to take on a few things that I hadn't considered before I ran, and I got no regrets with that. I plan to take on a lot more. This has been a lot of work and a lot of fun. Mr. Brown, you've made this a lot easier for me, and I appreciate that. The mayor, I want to say congrats to you on your last budget season. I appreciate all your guidance through this whole thing too, and it means a lot. So thanks to everybody.
Mr. McKee, final budget comments?
We stuck with the cap that you originally put for the school district contribution. I'm a little bit disturbed by that. They have in CARES money, which is operational of it, they received $20 million. They had a $20 million budget reserve, okay? They are projected to get $35 million more this next year in CARES money, okay? As a taxpayer, I think I'm being overtaxed, okay? If in fact we're going to allow the school district to have a savings account in excess of $50 million, I kind of wonder as a taxpayer if that's fair. Something to think about.
Okay, Mr. Took, comments?
I'm going to work a lot harder next year on reducing a lot more budgets.
Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank the staff and the assembly for all the hard work everybody put in here on this. I'd like to note that over last year, the area-wide mill rate has gone down approximately 4%, and the non-area-wide mill rate has gone down approximately 15%. So I think we did a good job here. And I'd also like to echo Assemblymember Nauer's comments about process. I do think that we should have our amendments in before the public hearings are finished. That way people have a chance to speak to them. Thank you.
Ms. Bovee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Assemblymember Nauers and Hale. Hundreds of staff and advisory board members spend 6 months
holding public meetings, and they presented us with a very well thought out budget. I want to thank them for their time and their expertise. And then in May, a small group of people attempt to bypass the public process with these 11th hour amendments. And this shows a lack of respect for staff, for our advisory boards, and for the people we represent. There's really no point in holding these public budget hearings if we're not going to be honest with our constituents about the budget we intend to pass. I hope we do better next year. Thank you.
Okay, well, we passed the budget after 2 deliberations, so I'm pretty happy with the assembly on doing that. I actually thought this was probably one of the best crafted, well-written budgets in my 12 years. I think I've stated that. So thank you, Mr. Manager and Ms. Heindel and everybody else that inputted it. Some of these smaller issues, I think when you have your directors come in and do their presentations to you, be ready to start questioning at that point in time, and maybe it'll save a little bit on amendments, even though, there's always been amendments just like this year's every year in the past that I recall. And the only one I wish, if somebody's going to reconsider all this, is that Mr. Dolan's staff employee, the $29,000 one. I think you missed a chance to on that one. The school district, they backed us up. They backed us up in Houston High School big time, about $11-12 million. And so we got that out to contract now. It's the bids. We kind of know where it's going. The bids came in nicely, below 34 million. And so they were there when we needed them. So and FEMA came through too. So we'll now be able to repay the school district like we should. And, but I still think there's room for the assembly to look at that ordinance, 03-04-046, and give the manager and Ms. Heindel a little flexibility on fine tuning the budget to present to you folks. That doesn't mean that's the final outcome, but I think there's room that you might want to look at that. And otherwise, when I look at the budget, I look at that fine bunch of people in the back of the room along with every other employee we have in the Matsu Borough. Because that's really what generates and drives the borough is the people that do the work. And so I want to thank you personally. And sometimes it's not fun, I'm pretty sure, watching the mayor and assembly take on a budget, because it's your daily lives that we're kind of dealing with. So, but it's not pretty sometimes, but it's part of the process. And I'm very happy that we didn't get below 10 on the area-wide mill rate. We've been always very consistent in the state throughout the state. I think our borough's been the best. And we've always had 6 was probably the lowest it's ever been, 9, 6 to 10. So we've always been really consistent in that non-area wide. I think there's, I guess I got a little excited about road service areas. You have to excuse me sometime, Mr. Two, because it is a archaic type system, but it works. And sometimes that overtime, people put their extra time into it. I know those contractors are trying to do the best job, but they need some push. And I guess that's what I respect about that part of that service area. So with that, I will miss doing budgets. I've never missed a public hearing on a budget. And so with that, I'll turn it over to whoever's the next mayor is going to be. One potential candidate maybe sitting in this room. I don't know. But with that, we'll adjourn. Mr. Manager, thank you. Ms. Heindel and everybody else. What do you got there, Madam Clerk? 9:32 p.m.